Please allow your interlocutor the opportunity to make their points without too much interruption there, right? Allow them to say what they're trying to say there. And remember, we're not adversaries, but rather participants in a productive debate, right? We're not enemies here. The moderation portion, I'm going to do my best to be as neutral as I can be on this. Continuous interruptions or over talking may lead to the use of moderation tools to ensure fairness. The goal is to protect the speaking time of both the affirmative and negative sides. I will strive to remain an unbiased moderator throughout the debate. Do either of you have any questions, or are you all ready to get into this?
Questions.
Perfect. So TJump, whenever you're ready, let me know, and we'll start the timer for your introduction portion.
Oh, I'm going first? Okay.
You ready?
Sure.
Perfect. I'm starting it now.
All right. So the reason that you should assume that morality reduces to the physical is that all evidence we've ever had of anything is physical. There is no non-physical substances that have ever been discovered and have met the criteria of being demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination. There may be many things that the physical cannot currently explain, but for all such things, we should assume it's physical because the physical category is the only category that has been demonstrated to exist. And in order to conclude that something else exists, you would have to demonstrate that whole category exists first, and then you could conclude morality is of that new category. Until such time as we demonstrate that a new category exists independently of our imagination, then the only rational conclusion is that anything that exists is reducible to physical substances. Specifically for morality, we have lots of reasons to believe that morality is physical, namely that it's a part of our physical brains, that physically interacts with our physical systems, that physical interactions cause moral things and non-physical things cause no moral things as far as we can tell. So it's most likely that morality is a physical concept. All of the evidence of morality reads physical interactions between other physical agents. There are no non-physical interactions that are moral as far as we can tell. Therefore, it's completely irrational to think that morality is anything but physical. I'll conclude there.
Perfect. Thank you, TJump. MadeByJimbob, let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your timer.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Starting it now.
Yeah. So the claim is that morality is physical, and it's based on the reasoning that under the assumption that everything else that exists ends up being physical. I would just reject that statement alone, but we can get into it. He said all evidence of anything that exists points to physicality. That's not actually the case. Knowledge itself is not physical. You can't pick it up or observe it directly. Truth is non-physical. You can't pick it up or measure it directly. Meaning is non-physical. The laws of logic, the three classical laws, they're not found as matter in the universe. He said morality is probably a physical concept. To me, that's a contradiction. Concepts are abstract. They're definitionally non-physical, and physical things are concrete. That's why there's a distinction between physical and abstract. Concrete, abstract. But further, if I would like to know TJump's moral theory on this, just stating that morality is physical, I'm wondering what the referent is that he's referring to when he says morality as a physical thing. Is it a force in the world? Is it a field? Is it like gravity? Does it act on objects? Does it not act on objects? If it is physical, then it should be inside the category of nature. And if it's a part of nature and it's acting on things, then it's probably some type of law of nature. And so if he holds the position that morality is some type of law that's impacting agents or objects in the world, for him to justify that, he's going to have to demonstrate what the referent is. What is it? What is it composed of? Does it have physical properties? And you demonstrated acting on an object and not acting on another object. The other thing that's assumed if it's physical, if it's whittled down to some type of law in nature, what we know of law of forces in nature that act on other things is that you can counteract it. So there are counter forces that are possible. So I'm wondering, under TJump's moral view, what are the counter forces on this physical thing he calls morality? So I'm looking tonight for the ontology of morality, if it is physical. Like everything else that we know to be physical, we can point to physical properties, There are particulars. There's a way in which it exists. There's a location in which they exist, and I'm not certain that TJump can present the necessary properties to convince myself or the audience that morality is in fact a physical item. I'm done.
Perfect. Sorry, just resetting the timers. All right, are y'all ready to get into the cross-examination, TJump?
Sure.
Perfect. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your 30-minute timer.
Who's going first?
It's you.
So I'm asking him questions?
Correct, and you're just building your case, right?
Sure.
You
I'm
ready? Cool.
Yeah. So if morality isn't physical, what is it?
I would say at start it would be conceptual, so it would be non-concrete. What it is we're referring to when we say morality, it would be in the same category as the other items that I listed: knowledge, truth, meaning, perhaps laws of logic. There's we assume a conceptual realm, and there's a concrete realm.
Is that those things, conceptual things, are physical in the brain and nothing more? So what exactly do you think that they are?
Oh, they are?
Yes, that is the consensus of experts in all related fields. What do you think they are? Yes.
Oh, so let's take one thing. Do you think the law of identity exists?
Law of identity is a sentence that describes reality. The law of identity doesn't self-exist, no.
Okay, does the physical reality exist?
Yes, physical reality exists.
Is that a concept in the brain or a concrete object?
The concept is the sentence, physical reality exists. That sentence doesn't exist independent of our imagination. But reality itself exists, and the sentence to describe it can correspond to it. That's what truth is. So, but I'm asking you the questions here. So what exactly do you think concepts are?
Concepts are immaterial, and they're not identical to matter. And so a concept is a way of conveying information, meaning, universals or particulars to other minds. And so if you say something like truth exists and you say it's a concept, then you'd have to say that truth exists as a particular item of matter in one particular brain. And how could it be universal if it's different in all brains?
This is very, very basic philosophy. Truth is whether a sentence describes reality or not. So if say the sentence, the sky is blue, does that sentence correspond to reality? Then it would be true. The truth doesn't exist. Trueness does not exist.
Doesn't exist. That's the end of the debate.
Property of sentences.
Well, if the truth doesn't exist,
stop interrupting. Stop interrupting, JimBob. Stop interrupting, JimBob. This is very, very basic philosophy. If you don't understand this, you just need to.
The truth doesn't exist. That's
JimBob. Stop. Truth does not exist. There's no truth in the table. The table exists. There's no truth found anywhere in the table. Truth is a property of sentences. Does the sentence describe reality? Yes or no? Does that exist anywhere in the sentence? No, it doesn't. It's a conceptual object. So no, truth does not exist. Truth is a property of sentences. This is very, very basic. We all know this in philosophy. It's extremely basic. So no, truth in and of itself doesn't exist. There's no truth. You can't discover truth under a rock. Truth is nothing. Truth is, stop interrupting, JimBob. Truth is a property of sentences. This is very basic. Demonstrate to me conceptual things as you describe them as non-material things. Demonstrate any non-material things exist. Go.
Any non-material things exist?
Yes,
that's question begging. You're begging the question of materialism when you ask the question. When I ask, does truth
demonstrate it exists? Like,
I'm saying
it exists.
You're appealing to empiricism. You're begging the question for naturalism and empiricism.
I did not mention empiricism, JimBob. I said demonstrate.
What is a demonstration then? What is a demonstration then?
Just means that you have to differentiate imagination from reality.
Tell me what you mean by demonstration.
I just
tell me
did,
what demonstration means.
JimBob, if you would stop interrupting, close your mouth and listen to the words, you will hear the answers as they come out of my mouth. It's magic. So demonstrate simply means you have to show that it exists independent of your imagination. That's it.
Cool. Show me that anything. So you're basically saying disprove solipsism, right? That's your argument tonight?
No, I never mentioned solipsism. I said demonstrate non-material things exist.
Demonstrate that non-material things exist?
Yes.
Okay. So was there a time frame in which our minds didn't exist?
Yes.
Okay. Did the physical reality that has objects and behaviors abide by the laws of logic?
No.
It didn't?
The laws of logic describe nature. Nature doesn't abide by them, no.
Oh, nature doesn't abide by the laws of logic. So a rock could be not a rock, right?
No, the laws of logic describe reality. They accurately describe reality, but reality isn't bound by them. It's not like the laws of logic make reality reality. No.
So a rock could be a tree.
So this is TJump's cross exam.
Reality.
Well, he asked me to demonstrate. So I'm using a line of inquiry to demonstrate that the laws of logic, law of identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, govern reality. Reality doesn't violate those laws, but they're not found in reality. So that's a demonstration of reality, hard reality, operating consistent with conceptual laws that are not found in reality.
So I just addressed this. No, if it was the case that logic or that nature was under the rule of logic and logic controlled nature, then yeah, that would be a good demonstration that logic existed in some sense. It doesn't. That is just abstractly false. We know that's false. Nature exists. It has a nature. It has a physical nature to it. The laws of logic describe that nature. They don't exist. They don't govern anything. They don't control anything.
No, that's a contradiction. That's a contradiction. You just said there is a nature to reality. That's a law of identity. Yeah. Can the nature of reality not be itself?
You can hold
the law of identity. The law of identity is a thing is itself. It is not.
Yeah, you just said there's a nature to
Jimbob, stop interrupting. Jimbob, stop interrupting. The description of saying a thing is itself does not make it itself. The law of identity isn't what forces an object to be itself. It was already itself without the laws. The laws don't do anything but describe the existence of the object. That's it. They don't control anything. They don't govern anything. It's like saying the sky is blue. Was the sky blue before anyone came up with a sentence? Yes, it was. You're confusing the fact that these sentences made up by humans to describe reality somehow control reality. They don't. That's just stupid. That's just patently stupid, and no one in philosophy even accepts that. It's just an insanely stupid
So your argument is something stupid, and everyone thinks one thing, and that's your argument.
All of the experts know that is stupid.
The experts know. That's your argument.
Here's how they know. No. Here's how they know. Stop, Jimbob. I gave the argument. I literally just said that, Jimbob. Maybe you need to check your hearing because you can't hear basic sentences. The fact that language describes things does not mean that the language controls the things they're describing.
I didn't say language controls anything.
That's exactly what you're saying. That's literally what you're saying. You're
saying
law of
identity is not language.
It is. It literally is. Literally, the very first sentence, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, classical logic is a language. And it's
no, I didn't say doing logic. I said the laws of logic, not doing logic.
Logic itself, all of it, including the laws of identity, those are all just a language. Jimbob, stop interrupting.
Law of identity is a language?
Stop interrupting. Yes, literally.
Okay, what language is the law of identity?
It's logic. Logic is a language. Literally, that's what it is.
What language?
Different laws of identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle. And they all work differently, but they can all describe reality. Logics have been proven to be nothing but a language that describes reality. So that argument fails, Jimbob. Do you have any other way to try to demonstrate?
What argument fails?
Shh, Jimbob. If you just...
I don't know what you're referring to, dude.
That's the second part. I'm going to finish my sentence, and then I'm going to answer that question before you ask it, because I already know what you're going to ask. I know how sentences work, Jimbob. So the first thing I said, your argument fails. Your argument that the laws of logic somehow demonstrate abstract objects exist fails because you just don't understand the philosophy behind the laws of logic.
This is your cross-examination.
Let's cut back on the personal attacks a little bit.
No, you're ruining all the fun. So, my question, again, was, do you have any ways to demonstrate that non-physical objects exist? Logic doesn't work. I demonstrated that pretty consistently. Do you have anything else?
Anything else? Well, you denied that truth exists, so that's self-refuting. Knowledge...
Okay, where does truth exist?
Dude, I'm giving you examples of things that conceptually exist, and their ontology is an identical
Where does it exist?
Where is assuming naturalism and physicalism?
No, I'm like an ontology. And ontologies can be aware. So where does truth exist? Can I find
where does truth exist? Truth, you said doesn't exist. So how am I going to argue with you where it exists?
This is my question time, and I'm asking you a question. Where does truth exist? Now I have an answer to this. I can clearly answer this. The table exists. The sentence, the table exists. The truth in that sentence doesn't exist. It's just a concept of our minds that sentences describe reality. But the table exists just fine without the sentence. If there are no sentences, there is no truth, because truth only exists if there is a sentence, and the sentence describes reality. So if there is no sentences, before any sentences ever existed, there was just reality, and
So
you
that
couldn't
just
find truth
denied a
anywhere.
past. You just denied a past.
Just how did I deny a past?
Was there
Jim
a past, or is that a concept?
Yeah, there was a past, Jim Bob.
Okay, so now you're denying there's a past because you actually can't prove there's a
I
past.
literally just said, yes, there is a past, Jim.
How do you demonstrate there's a past? That's a concept.
That's a good question for your cross exam.
Well, he's asking me the questions, so I'm answering them by pointing to the past is an example. That's something he appeals to that isn't found in the physical. He just said it existed.
Jim Bob, the past is literally physical. Literally, space and time are
where's the
physical
past?
things.
Where's the past?
The past, B theory of time, it's an actually existing thing.
No,
it's a manifold.
where is the
it's a
past?
space manifold. I literally just answered that, Jim Bob. It's a manifold.
Where?
It is a manifold that actually
It's
exists.
a manifold? That doesn't tell me where it exists.
B theory of time.
No, you just got debunked.
All manifolds exist as dimensions within a quadrant space. That's
tautological. That doesn't tell me where that exists.
Tautological.
Demonstrated the past. You asked me a question. Demonstrate something that exists that isn't physical. I said the past, and you're done. You're cooked. It's over. Yeah. Oh, where? What's the past made of?
Oh my God.
What's the past made of?
Basic physics. Space and time.
Basic physics. The past is made of something. Okay, go.
Yes, it's literally a field, Jim. Have you never heard of Einstein? General relativity, space and time curvature. Have you never? These are things you've never heard of. Concepts you probably should research. Where space and time are literally physical things, Jim Bob. How did you not know this? Did you not graduate high school, Jim Bob? This was covered. This was covered in high school, Jim Bob.
Top tier stuff, Tom.
Jim Bob, have you never heard of general relativity? Is that
top
thing?
Tier stuff?
It's a question, Jim Bob. Have you heard?
You're
of
a professional philosopher,
Jim Bob. This is my question time. Have you heard of general and special relativity?
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Have you heard that space and time bend physically?
Oh, time is a physical thing?
Yeah. Yes.
What's it made out of? Yeah, no. What's it made of? I've never heard of it.
It's a manifold.
No, that doesn't tell me what it's made of. What's a manifold made of?
A manifold is a quadrant space with certain kinds of dimensions to it.
What's it made of? I said.
Manifold is the answer. Oh my God! If you Google manifold,
Google it, guys. Google. Yep. Epistemology. Google. Great work.
Yes.
Anything else?
I literally answer your question, and
you want to ask me anything else?
Understand the answer.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the manifold. Gotcha. Okay.
Let's try to cut back on the interrupting just a little bit, please.
Jim Bob is just angry that I know more than him about pretty much everything.
Wow, that's a good argument.
So, your first attempt was logic. I showed that doesn't work. Your second attempt was time. We all know that's physical from space-time. Do you have anything else? Do you have any other way to try to show that there's non-physical stuff out there? Anything else?
Yeah, knowledge. Does knowledge exist?
Knowledge is the same thing as truth. It is a concept in the mind. It is a
a
justified true belief. It exists in the mind. It's literally
so it doesn't exist. So there's only one truth. So it's a particular.
No, knowledge is a physical thing in the brain. Yes.
So it's a particular.
Yes.
So truth isn't universal then. Great work. You're done debating, dude. Quit your career.
No.
You just turned truth into a particular, dude.
Jim Bob, you said knowledge. Remember, we're on knowledge now. I already debunked
knowledge.
The truth thing before.
Dude, you've turned both knowledge and truth into particulars in the brain.
Knowledge can be a particular just fine, right? Is
that a universal claim or a particular?
What does that?
Is that universally true? Is that universally true?
That knowledge can be a thing. Can be is literally a particular. Can be doesn't mean it is always. So if I can say knowledge can be a physical thing in the brain, that's not a universal claim. Do you even know how universal claims work, Jim?
You just said truth exists in a particular brain.
I said knowledge exists in a particular brain. We're talking about knowledge, Jim Bob. You asked a question about knowledge.
Yeah, knowledge is in the same category of truth. If it's just exists in a particular brain, then there's no universal knowledge.
Jim Bob, I debunked your truth claim with the logic thing. Go to the knowledge claim. So you brought up knowledge. You said knowledge.
Is it physical?
Yes, knowledge is a physical.
What's it made of? What is it made of?
Neurons.
Which neurons make up knowledge and which don't?
So knowledge is a justified true belief. So it's a belief, whichever neurons cause the belief, are the neurons that composite knowledge.
Wow.
That's not very
You've
hard.
said nothing. You've said literally nothing.
What? How have I? So a belief.
I asked you which neurons, because you're teaching us right now. Everybody's waiting on your philosophy here. You're teaching us. You're teaching us. I'm trying to repeat what you're teaching us. You said knowledge exists as a particular item or set of items in a brain, in any brain, And I asked
That
you
is correct.
which one, what is it made of? You said neurons. I said, which neurons are knowledge and which aren't? And you didn't answer the question.
I did. I had said, this is, like, pay attention again. I'll say it again. You can rewind
say
the
it
video.
again.
I said,
Yeah, cool.
knowledge is a justified true belief. So beliefs are a thing. They're neurons in the brain. So whichever neurons are causing the beliefs, those neurons.
You don't know them.
Do you want me to number them or something? How
No,
do
you
you want
just
me to
don't
describe
know.
them?
You're just asserting something you have no justification for. That's all.
I literally just answered the question. So which part of knowledge is a belief? Don't you do you agree knowledge is a belief?
I asked you which neurons are knowledge and which aren't. You said the ones that are knowledge.
Jimbob, this is my question period. Do you agree knowledge is a justified true belief?
Sure, I can go with that definition.
Sure. Beliefs. Do you agree that beliefs are based on neurons in the brain?
What do you mean based on? Are identical?
It means
or
I can scramble your neurons and you don't have the beliefs anymore.
That would be talking about the hardware that transfer or convey the medium. So
Jimbob,
if
I cut out a part of your brain, will you lose memories? Is this a proven thing that's been proven in neurology for hundreds of years?
What I just said,
Jimbob, this is a yes or no question. Can I cut out your brain? I don't care, Jimbob. This is a yes or no question. Can I cut out a part of your brain and you lose memories?
Yes, that doesn't mean that memories are physical.
Okay, stop. So they're based in some way in the neurons. So there you go.
You're not saying they're based, you're saying they're identical. Stop saying based now. Now you're switching your terms. Now you're saying they're based. Does that mean they're identical?
Works. So if I cut out your neurons,
you're saying they're identical, not based.
Jimbob, that's irrelevant to the question here.
Which is it?
The question here is about knowledge, right? Knowledge is a belief. Beliefs are neurons. So if I take out the neurons, you lose the knowledge, right? You no longer have knowledge, right, Jimbob?
Which neurons?
The ones that hold the beliefs, whichever one those are, Jimbob.
Okay, I asked you which neurons are knowledge.
Asking which neurons, Jimbob? It doesn't matter.
Because your answer is the ones that have knowledge. I asked you which ones are those. You said the ones with knowledge.
The ones that have
which ones are those? Yeah. Which ones are those?
You want me to give you an fMRI? Because I can show you which ones they are. I can have you think of a belief. I can.
Which one holds Apple? fMRI. Yeah, which one holds?
It'll be different for everybody, Jimbob. It'll be different for every person. So, but I can give you the answer. I can give you an fMRI. I can have you think of an apple, and I can identify those are the neurons that are the apple neurons, and then I can cut them out, and you won't be able to think of an apple. I can do all of that, Jimbob. All of that shows it's physical.
You can, but you just won't.
I mean, we can. If you want to pay the money for the fMRI, I'm happy to do this. This is a very simple thing. Like, go for it. This is not difficult.
Very simple.
Pretty simple, yes. fMRIs are.
It's simple for you to just make assertions, and you can't justify the assertions
about fMRIs, which are things that we've known.
You're just making claims. Yeah, you're just making claims you don't have access to.
About an actual machine that has literally been built and is in every hospital around the world. Yes.
No, you're just arguing the capability, right? Now you're just talking about capability.
Oh God, Jimbob's arguments are dumb. So I disproved you on knowledge. I disproved you on truth. I disproved you on, what was the other one again? I forget. But yes, I've disproved you on all of those. Do you have any other ones? Any other ways to try to show that there's non-physical stuff?
Information.
Information is a physical process, literally from a stochastic system. This is a quote from, what's his name? Claude Shannon's 1971 paper on information theory, where he literally invented it. It's literally physical. Next. Debunk that one. Next.
Wait a second. Hold on a second. I just give you something called information, and your answer is a guy wrote a paper, it's literally physical. That's your rebuttal. That's your demonstration that information is physical. Okay, let me do it a different way, TJump. Can you, for us, because you're asking me to give you examples that aren't physical. I say information itself. The data plus the semantics we add to data, add to objects. It's not found in the object itself. So are you saying that okay, are you saying the information apple exists in an apple?
The information apple? I don't know what an information apple is.
Information apple, what we mean by the universal apple, what we mean by that is that found as matter in the apple.
What is a universal apple? That doesn't make sense.
Do you know what an apple is?
Yes, I know what an apple is.
How do you know what an apple is, if not a universal concept of what an apple is?
There's no such thing as a universal concept of an apple. An apple is a fruit.
Okay, so what are you referring to? Well, is a fruit a universal?
No.
So a fruit's not a universal now, but you refer to an apple as a fruit. Wow, this is top tier shit.
Yes, I mean universals are things that are true upon all points of space and time in the universe, and all time frames. Like that's just not the
That's just
case for truths.
that's
Truths
just a
are subjective.
proposition that doesn't actually exist, though, physically, based on your view.
Yes, it doesn't
Yeah.
exist. That's correct.
Yeah, the
So,
proposition you just
truths
made doesn't
truths
exist,
aren't
right? So it's not true.
universals.
Yeah, it does.
Truths
How can non-existent things be true?
okay, not because truth is a property of sentences. Sentences don't exist. Problem solved.
Oh, so truth is a property of non-existent things? That's amazing, TJump. You should write a book sometime.
I did
You
publish.
did? Is it called Truth Doesn't Exist?
Well, no, that part was already known for
Can't
like
wait. I'll
hundreds of
buy it
years.
from you. You can
So,
sign it, right?
truth is a property of sentences. It's a surprising fact to most theists. I know they just haven't
Yeah.
read basic philosophy. They should
What are we
probably
talking
work
about?
on
What do you mean theism?
Just under
This has
10
nothing to do
minutes.
with theism. You just
100%.
said that truth is a property of something that doesn't exist. How can there be a property of something that doesn't
I'm
exist,
sorry.
TJump?
They exist in your brain. They don't exist abstractly. That was
Oh, so
my
truth is a
mistake.
property of only your brain, and my brain's different, so we don't share. There is no universal truth. There's particulars.
Truth is a property of sentences. It's not a property of
Oh.
brains. So there's a
Do
sentence, and the
sentences exist?
sentence in your brain. Yes, that is correct.
And when you
Sentences exist
say
in
a
your brain.
sentence, where does that exist?
Neurons, it exists in the neurons.
Wait,
Just
so
like
when you
beliefs.
say it out into the air, it just still goes back into the neurons, or
Yeah, when you say it, the words don't literally just go from your mouth into like reality. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Sound does. But
You're
the
debating.
sound
Yeah, but
doesn't
you're
like
debating.
carry anything with it. So yeah, it's still a part of your brain.
Sound
J-Lo.
doesn't carry any meaning with it.
Even after you say it, it's still a part of your
Uh-huh.
brain.
So, okay.
All right, I don't have any more questions. I've debunked him on all his points so far, so we can move on.
Okay, so you're ceding the rest of your time here?
Yep, I'm happy with that.
Perfect. Give me 2 seconds. Jim Bob, let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your 30-minute timer. Perfect. Starting it now.
Tom, do you think that the imposition of will is immoral?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think the laws of nature are an imposition of will?
Some of them, yes.
Do you think the moral field is a law of nature?
Yes.
Is the moral field an imposition of will?
No.
How is the moral field not an imposition of will if it's a law of nature?
Not all laws of nature are impositions of will.
I didn't ask you if you thought all laws were. I asked you specifically, how is the moral field a law of nature but doesn't impose on our will?
So if not all laws of nature impose on will, then something can be a law of nature.
I didn't ask
not
whether
impose-
you
Oh my God,
it
Jim,
can
I'm
be,
literally-
Tom, you sophist. I asked you
Oh
a
my
very
God.
specific
Oh my God.
question. The moral
Wow.
field is a law of nature. I'm asking you, how does the moral field specifically not impose on our will, please?
So to impose on someone's will, you need to have a will that goes against something.
What? Look, which
What do you think
laws
the
of
word
nature?
impose mean?
Okay, is gravity a pseudo force?
I don't. Sure.
If I have the will to jump to the moon, is gravity imposing on my
Yes.
will? Is gravity
Yes.
evil under your theory?
Yes.
Okay, gravity is evil. The moral field is similar in its ontology from your view as gravity, right? It's some type of field that impacts objects in space, right?
Sure.
So I'm asking you, if the moral field akin to gravity impacts objects in space, aka human beings or other, how is it not an imposition of will?
What is it stopping you from doing? Like gravity, you can't jump. So that's
You're asking me a question. I'm
Yes.
asking you a question. If like gravity, the moral field is a law of nature that affects things, right? Like gravity. You said gravity is evil, right?
Yep.
What's the meaningful distinction categorically and practically of your moral field in contrast to gravity if they're both laws of nature?
gravity stops you from doing something, namely jumping. The moral field does not stop you from doing something. That would be.
And
the
how did
difference.
you determine the moral field doesn't stop you from doing something, but it maintains its ontology as a law of nature?
Because you can do lots of immoral things.
No,
What?
that's just claiming certain actions are immoral. I didn't ask you what actions you thought were immoral. I asked you, how is it that the moral field in your view, acts and exists similar to the gravity and affects things? And how did you determine it doesn't affect things?
So if the moral law was like gravity and it stopped you from doing immoral things, then you wouldn't be able to do immoral things. And then it would be an imposition on your will. Sure, I would agree. It doesn't stop you from doing things, so it's not an imposition of your will.
Okay, so if I can fly up against gravity, am I countering? Is that a counter force against gravity that I'm overcoming gravity?
No.
It's not? So if gravity is a law that impacts us, and you said gravity is immoral, and if I can overcome and win against gravity, the force, by a stronger force against it, I'm asking you, is there a counter force that's similar to the moral law?
I don't know what that means. There's no counter forces. That's not a thing.
Okay. Can you act against what you call the moral field?
I don't know what that means.
If the moral field is like gravity, it's a law of nature that acts on objects, which you said it did. How do you determine which objects it's acting on and which it isn't?
How does this relate to the previous question? I'm lost.
Oh my gosh. So, did you accept premise 1 is the imposition of will is immoral? You said gravity is immoral. Yeah. Premise 2, the laws of nature are an imposition of will. Laws of gravity.
That's
gravity.
That's just false.
Okay. Well, it's not false because you said, isn't gravity a law of nature?
Well, this is the part where I literally answered and I said, not all laws of nature are
I didn't ask
impositions of
all.
will.
I said,
wait, Jimbob, you literally just did. You literally, that was the second premise. That's literally the second premise.
Dude, that's what I'm asking. If I change premise 2 to some laws of nature are impositions of will. Okay, great.
Yes,
gravity is.
Agree.
Great.
Yes.
Which, if the moral field is a law of nature, which you're positing it is, tell me what's distinct about the moral field. If it's in the same category as the law of gravity and it affects objects, how did you determine which objects the moral field affects and which it doesn't?
You look at the evidence of the phenomenon of morality and say the things that it relates to are the things it affects, and the things it doesn't relate to are things it doesn't affect.
Oh, okay.
Moral intuition, moral progress, moral dilemmas.
Can you name a phenomenon that you know from your
moral intuition,
model?
moral progress, moral dilemmas?
Wait, an action in the world that you know is immoral that's actually going against the moral field.
There's, again, going against isn't a thing. That part doesn't make sense.
Okay. I'm asking you a fundamental question here. If you hold morality as a field, that it exists as physical in nature, I asked you, does this physical field affect objects? Is the answer yes?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Does it affect all objects?
No, probably not.
How do you know which objects it affects and which it doesn't?
So I already answered this again. We look at the evidence of the phenomenon of morality, and the things to which that applies, we assume it affects, and the things it doesn't apply to, we assume it doesn't affect. Maybe it does affect.
You didn't tell me how you determine that. You just asserted that that's the case. No, you just asserted the thing I just explained to you. I asked you, how do you determine? No, hold on. I asked you, how do you determine between the two? Your answer was asserting that the two exist. I asked you, how do you distinguish between the two? With examples.
Separately, Jim.
With examples. With examples, please.
I said moral intuition and moral progress. Those are examples of moral phenomena.
No. Look, does a lion violates the will of a gazelle? Is that evil under the moral theory, field theory? Okay.
Yes.
That's an imposition of will. How did you determine that was an imposition of will, but something else wasn't?
I looked at the evidence of moral intuition and moral progress. I found a pattern, and then I inferred that pattern applies to things that we don't have intuitions about.
So your epistemic standard for determining your criteria is an intuition?
Yes, that is literally
if people have
the
conflicting
thing,
if people have conflicting intuitions, what's the arbiter?
We follow patterns in moral intuition, moral progress.
No, that's just going back. That's like talking to a Protestant. You just go back to the Bible. I asked you, if two people have different concepts of moral progress and intuition, how do you reconcile or how do you arbitrate between the two in moral field theory?
All right, I'll say it again slower. Maybe you'll get it this time.
Yeah, say it slower. I'm sure
in
everyone.
moral intuition and moral progress, and this applies to everyone, like all
Wow.
moral intuition, not just two people.
That's amazing, TJump. So when I ask you if there's two people who both look at patterns and from their intuition interpret the patterns differently in regards to what they claim moral progress is, they come to two different conclusions that are contradictory. How do you determine which one's right?
We would take whatever their hypothesis is, take a bunch of data points that fits their hypothesis, and see if it matches the data.
All right. So someone believes that Malthusianism is moral progress. They're scared that there's overpopulation. They want to increase the well-being of a select few at the mercy of other people, right? So they're basically saying, let's annihilate 1/3 of the population. This is intuitively, I believe this is moral progress and this is morally good. Another group of people say, no, that's not good. That's not moral progress. My intuitions say otherwise. How do you determine, from moral field theory, TJump's worldview, how do you determine which of those those claims are true if they're both appealing to intuition and they're both appealing to their concept of moral progress?
We would look at the patterns of moral intuitions and moral progress across time and across cultures, and we
They don't agree on progress, dude.
So if we look at the patterns, like the patterns are physical things like women's rights, Indian slavery, workers' rights, animal rights, et cetera, et cetera. And we'd say, well, does the interpretation that Thanosism fit this pattern? Well, no, the Thanosism does not seem to fit this pattern. Therefore, he would be wrong and the other person would be right.
No, that's a naturalistic fallacy. The pattern of humanity is kill or be killed, dominate or be dominated, take over using force, brutality. Most of humanity is brutalism. That's the pattern of reality. Are you saying that the intuition derived from watching the pattern of humanity, it being brutality, brutalism, takeover, terrestrial gain, force, all of this stuff, just because it's a pattern, it seems to be the dominant pattern, that therefore anyone who intuitively said, well, moral progress seems to go in the direction of brute force wins, that's your moral field model?
I have no idea what you're talking about, JimBob.
You don't know what I'm talking about? You just said, let's look at patterns. I'm assuming when you look at patterns, you're looking at the behavior of human beings.
No, we're looking at moral intuitions and moral progress. We're not looking at behavior.
Yeah, is that a human pattern?
It is one of many, but
so
many are not.
Why'd you say no then?
Because so JimBob, you keep running into this.
No, I asked you, why'd you say no to something?
I'm answering the question, JimBob. You're just not understanding. So there's this fallacy that you don't understand. Like all flowers or all roses are flowers, not all flowers are roses. So there's a big category and then there's a small category, and something in the small category doesn't mean it's a part of the big category, or vice versa, JimBob.
It's amazing.
So there are lots of human behaviors. That's the flowers. Lots of human behaviors. And
that's amazing, TJump. Listen. No, give me my time back. I don't need your. How do you determine what progress is?
I'm literally answering the question, JimBob.
How do you determine what's the methodology?
Literally answering the question, JimBob.
Cool. He's moving on to the next question. It sounds like TJump.
No. This is the same question, and it's the same answer.
No, hold on.
Literally the same answer.
Just calm down. If you want to sell your book, you should probably answer this question. Okay.
I literally was answering it when you asked
yes or no.
Question, JimBob.
Look, yes or no. Do different cultures have different concepts of what progress is?
Sure.
Okay. If the pattern of humanity includes two different cultures having incompatible terms and standards for progress, how do you determine, given that both of them are patterns in reality, how do you look at them and determine which one aligns with your moral field and which one doesn't?
Literally already.
TJump, from his moral field model, how does he determine which interpretation of progress is true, is the right one? You know what he said? You have to look at the progress. I don't need to say anything else.
You
literally said, look at the data and look at the moral progress. I'm at the moral progress is what's in question,
JimBob,
dude.
You're so stupid. So
telling me I'm stupid is not a counter.
It is. It literally is. When you're as stupid as you are, JimBob.
No, let's go back on the personal attacks a little bit.
Yeah. You lost. You already lost.
Very, very, very simple. So if you have a hypothesis and your hypothesis has entailments, There's going to be data apart those entailments. And then you're going to take that data and you're going to look at the data of the past. This is not, you don't get an opinion on this data. These data of the past are facts. These are just facts you don't get an opinion on.
I got you. We don't interpret data.
Yeah. JimBob. And so if your entailments of your hypothesis disagree with the past, disagree with the facts, your hypothesis...
Societies, wiping out societies, taking their stuff, taking their women, warfare, that is the pattern of human reality.
What does that have to do with morality, JimBob?
What it has to do with is if you're arguing, and I ask you, if two cultures have incompatible concepts of progress. Let's say one says, no, we're a human culture that thinks domination is the thing. We're going to use force to implement our rules and our ideology and our customs. And another group is more passive and they say, no, our concept of progress is passive and nonviolent. I asked you, how do you determine which one aligns with your moral field? You said you have to look at the data of the past. Well, the data of the past will demonstrate. If the data of the past suddenly demonstrated that brutalism won out and was the dominant feature of humanity, that's the data that's going to tell you which one's correct, right? According to your model.
Which moral intuitions show that, JimBob?
Show what?
So your argument is that there's two cultures. They have different ideas of progress. One thinks progress is war and stuff, and taking over by force, and one thinks it's pacifism and kindness and socialism. And so if we think that war is the correct view of morality, then you would think that if we looked at the past intuitions of moral peoples across time, then they would lead towards war good.
Okay, so let me frame what he just said. I just posited a hypothetical where the two different groups have contrary opinions and views on the interpretation of the data. That's what's in question. They interpret the data to say that force wins, and another interprets the data to say, well, no, it's moral to be a pacifist and isolate yourself, okay? I asked you, how do you determine which one's the moral one? He says the moral one. The one that looks at the data and interprets it through their paradigm and determines what's moral. That's his answer to this question, which is a non-answer.
No,
that is a non-answer, dude.
Oh, Bob. Oh my God.
It's a non-answer.
Again, this is you not understanding the difference between the flowers and the roses. The violence answer, saying that morality is from violence or whatever, you have to look at the data that is relevant to morality. Saying you
by what? TJump, is data interpreted through a paradigm? Yes or no?
Sure.
Great. So if the pacifists interpret the data and they come to the conclusion that pacifism is correct, and the brutalists come to the conclusion, the same data, by the way, that their path is correct and morally good, you're back to square one. How do you determine which of them has the correct interpretation of the data and the right assertion morally?
So let me try to simplify this for you. If someone says that eating potatoes is immoral, that their culture interprets eating potatoes as immoral, we would look at all of the cultures all around the world and say, well, does everybody congregate on this belief? Is this a common belief, or is this something that one society subjectively made up? If it's a common belief around the world, and you think that's the true objective morality, that's what you would expect. You'd expect that the true objective morality would be something that all the cultures and all the conscious agents around the world congregate on the same beliefs. If that doesn't happen, then it's probably not objective morality. You probably just made that shit up. The same thing applies to violence. If you think violence is the objective morality, just like the culture eating potatoes is the objective morality, you'd look at the cultures all the way around the world and say, well, if this is objective morality, all the cultures would congregate on this belief being a moral belief. They don't, Bob. This is very simple.
They did at some point.
Not a moral belief.
Hold on. The fact that you say there's something, the fact that you say there's something called moral progress means there was a time in which this kind of thing wasn't manifest yet. So if there was a time in human history where the dominant thing was actually brutalism, you'd actually say that was moral.
It was never the dominant thing in morality.
It was never the dominant. No, are you saying in human history, there was never a time where the dominant reality was brute force warfare?
This is why I asked you, what does this have to do with
morality? I asked you a question.
I asked you a question.
I'm
trying to answer it.
Stop. I'm asking you a question right now.
Trying to give you context.
No, it's my question. Shut up.
I'm literally trying to answer it, Bob.
Was there a time? It's a yes or no question. Was there a time?
It was never.
Let me ask him. Was never a time.
Moral. No. It's never.
I didn't say moral. I said, was there ever a time? Dude, let me ask you a question.
we're
let
looking
me
at
ask.
patterns.
No, calling patterns moral is what the debate is.
Jimbo,
Whether or not a
stop
pattern
talking.
exists
Stop
is what
talking.
I'm
just gonna
asking.
mute you on mine. You've been muted
Why,
on mine.
dude, this
I
guy,
can't hear you.
I have to ask
So
him
my
questions,
audience,
dude.
my audience can hear me answer and they cannot hear JimBob, and I'm okay with this.
Who cares?
So the answer.
So
is
he's
that
just gonna, dude. This
there are
is so
things
weak.
that are
He's
not
literally
considered
taking
relevant
over
to
the
morality,
debate, breakfast
like
dog. He's
So-
taking
or
control
whatever.
over the
He's
platform.
trying to
There are
respond to the
things-
question, so
I'm gonna
just
mute
give him a
him.
moment to respond.
Just let me finish. You can do whatever you want. I don't even care. So, because I muted him on mine, so I can't hear him. So there are things that are not related to morality, like eating potatoes. It's just not related to morality. War is not related to morality. Nobody's saying winning wars is moral. That is not a thing in any culture, in any history where we're thinking winning wars is moral. So if we're looking
For
at the
pagans.
moral data and we're trying to understand, does this moral system agree with the moral data? Listing things that are completely
Moral data?
unrelated to
Fucking
morality,
moral
like
data.
potatoes or
There's
winning
moral
wars,
data now.
is not going to be things you're looking at to agree with the moral data.
Okay,
You look at the
stop
things
filibustering,
that are
dude.
specifically related to morality, like moral
Unbelievable.
intuitions, not winning wars. Winning wars has
Filibustering.
nothing to do with morality.
And which data is not moral?
Moral intuitions and moral progress. Yes. The
I
things
asked
to
you
which
the
word
data.
moral. What?
What? Name some
Women's
moral
rights.
data. Let's name
LGBT
some.
right.
No.
Women's
LGBT.
rights.
What? What? Okay, rights. Hold. This
Indian
is great.
slavery.
Are rights? Oh wait, are rights moral?
Yes.
Okay. Do rights require the imposition of will?
No.
Yes, they do. If I violate, if
No.
my will is to violate someone's rights, isn't it the fact that there is brute force waiting when I do that and it imposes my will? If I want to violate rights,
No.
isn't
you
that an
don't need,
imposition
you
of
don't
will?
need a
Oh,
violation
it's
for
a game
rights. You can
over,
have a
bro.
right.
It's
No.
over.
Literally nothing you said made sense
Stop,
there. You can have
stop.
rights
Look,
without any
all these
violation.
premises. No, shh. Do you believe in
Here's
human
so dumb.
rights? Shh.
All right, one sec. I'm gonna
You
mute
believe- you said-
JimBob again. One sec.
Yeah,
I'm
this
gonna
guy's
mute
so weak, he
JimBob so I
mutes
can
his
answer the
opponent
question.
during
All right, so you can
cross-examination.
have rights
Dude, this is-
without any
this is
imposition of will.
bullshit.
Like suppose you're
This
in
is
my
weak-ass
basketball
shit,
possible
breakfast
world where there's
tacos.
literally no imposition of will.
It's
you can
not your
have
turn to talk.
rights. If there is a world where it's literally impossible to have any imposition of will, it's literally impossible, you can still have rights.
But I didn't
Like,
ask
you can
whether or
have
not
the right
you
to
think.
pick your nose.
I didn't
even
ask if you think.
literally no one can stop you.
Cool.
No one can impose on you. You can still have
no,
rights.
hold on.
So no,
Well,
you don't need this
in
idea of impositions to have
No.
rights. Doesn't make any sense.
Really. So if I have a right
All right,
to do
JimBob, you're
something,
muted.
if I have a right to do something, aren't you suggesting there's such a thing as not having the right to do something? Is that an entailment of a right to do something? Is that there's the opposite
No.
could be true? No. So you have a right to do everything, right?
No.
Okay, dude. So what's the answer? Do I have a right to do everything or not?
No.
I don't. So what am I don't have the right to do?
Impose on other people.
Is that an imposition of will? The imposition of me not imposing on other people, is that an imposition of will?
No.
Just
Yes,
under
it
4
is.
minutes?
No.
Okay, if it's not an imposition of will, if you don't allow someone to impose on other people's will, right? If that's not an imposition of will, I'm not sure he knows what an imposition of will is. If I'm not allowed to impose my will on someone else, right? And you call that rights, the protection of rights. There's a man with a gun that doesn't allow me to impose my will on other people. I asked TJump here, is that an imposition of will? He says no.
Correct. It is not, because will only
is it
applies to yourself and your property. You do not have a right to have a will over somebody else's property. And so, no, it is not an
Says
imposition
who?
of will.
Says who?
It says me, who defines
Says
the term.
you. Says
my
you who
morality?
defined it, right? So you're
Jim-
saying
JimBob, you're asking about my model of morality. Yes,
yeah,
I literally
right.
defined the term.
You have a contradiction.
Yes,
you have a contradiction. You have a
No,
contradiction.
no,
Yes,
I
it is.
gave
It's a
the definition.
performative
Will-
contradiction.
No, I'm
It's
going
a
to mute
perform-
JimBob and answer the question.
Yeah, mute me.
All right,
Shut
so
up.
will is defined
Dude,
as
this-
applying to yourself and
this
your
is not a
property.
debate,
so if you
dude. This
will
is
to
not
harm
serious.
another human being,
He just
their
gets to
self and their
mute
property,
people.
it is not an
and talk to his
imposition
own
of will,
audience.
because will is literally
He's the
defined
moderator.
as
He's the
only
moderator.
applying to
He's
yourself and your property.
No,
He's
he's the
so
moderator.
when
Breakfast
he's
Taco.
responding to your question,
No.
allow him to respond, and then you can ask another question, right?
Okay.
To be fair, there has been a fair amount of interrupting during responses.
Yeah.
Time up yet?
There's just over 2 minutes left.
Did you catch my answer, JimBob?
No, I heard you assert the claim that if I have a gun in a society that's ordered and
You've
assumes
never
rights,
condoned.
I am talking. If there's a society that's set up and you say rights are moral, The rights that are set up assumes that one person can't do this other thing to another person. But that one person has the will to do that. And so the law and the force of that society is using force to stop and to punish the people who are exhibiting and expressing their will. I ask you, is that an imposition of their will? The answer you said is no. How is it not an imposition of will to put someone in jail for expressing their will?
Well, that would be, but I'm not talking about jail. Like putting someone in jail for any reason would be. So the question was about
so you're against jail. Your moral model's against jail.
Yes,
yeah, it has to be
technically true.
So
yes,
no
100%.
jail in your moral model. Great theory. Great moral theory.
No, you still have it. It's a justified immoral action. Like you can do immoral things that are justified. But to answer your original question, you said that rights imply that you have to have the ability to enforce the rights or take away the rights or something. That's false. You could be in my best of all possible worlds. Maximum.
Said rights assume force.
Yes, rights assume. Okay, rights assume force. Yeah, no, they don't.
Yeah.
So in my model, we're in the best of all possible worlds, the maximization of my morality, where it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. You can still have rights. So in that world, it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing, but you still have rights. So your question was, does the will to harm other people and not being able to fulfill that will count as an imposition of will? The answer is no, because in my model, as I've defined will is defined as applying to yourself and your property. So your will, you can will to do things regarding yourself and your property. But if you will to do something with somebody else's will, that's not an imposition, no.
Oh, great. Is property a legal term or just a philosophical term you made up in the woods?
Philosophical term?
It's not a legal term?
It's also a legal term, but I'm not using it in the legal term.
When you say property, are you using the legal term or the philosophical term?
A philosophical term. In my model, your property would be like your universe.
Okay. Right.
That is time, but we can finish up here. You guys can have another minute or two to finish up here.
Okay. So you're in the woods, TJump, and you collected some things, and you have some weapons to protect you from animals and potential people who are going to take your stuff, right? You claim you have the right to the stuff you have. You call that stuff your property. 3 men come along in the woods, and they go, "Hey, TJump, I like what you're doing here. We want your stuff, and we have force." And you say, "No, I have a right to my property." In that instance, there's only 2 things that are occurring. 1 will versus 3 wills. Okay. So under your moral model, I'm not certain what you're referring to as rights. If what you really mean by rights is the ability to defend what is currently in your possession. And if you don't have adequate force, it's fair for the other 3 to take your shit. How's it not fair? They're just using their will.
The legal term of right. I'm using the philosophical term of rights.
I know. So what's wrong? What's immoral with about 3 people taking your shit? It's their expression of their will.
It's an imposition of my will. Duh. Easy.
Oh, so now it's immoral to impose on someone else's will.
Okay, last question and response here.
It's always immoral to impose on someone.
It's always immoral. Yeah. Except for when your will is to impose on other people.
All right.
Because then it's not your will, it's their will. Yeah. Easy.
What are you talking about? It's 2 wills, dude. If it's immoral, first of all, if it's immoral to violate someone's will, then violating
Answer the question again. So all right. So if you will to harm someone else's will, the imposition is on the else's will, the other person's will, not your will. And so it'd be an imposition on their will.
Why is there more important? Why is there under your moral field? Why is their will more important? Why is in your moral field theory, why is one person's will more important than the other?
We did just ask the last question, JimBob.
Someone else's will, then it's their will to take priority.
Why is it more important?
So there's
your will is literally about their will.
That's the culmination of the cross-examination. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to the next portion here, which is going to be the question and answers. It looks like there's one person with their hand raised right now. For anybody that wants to chat on stage with our guests, feel free to hop in the Discord. It's discord.gg/politics. And you just hop on stage, raise your hand, we'll pull you up. If you have a question that hasn't been asked yet, go ahead. There are a couple right now, but go ahead and hop on my YouTube. Doesn't cost anything. You can just hit the Q&A button and ask a question. Let me get those pulled up right now. So the first question was for JimBob, and it was from Northern Brother. And he was asking, did Jesus know about the germ theory of disease?
Germ theory?
Yes, the germ theory of disease.
Well, God knows everything. So yeah, what's your point?
And why did he say not to wash his hands? Burned.
That's not an argument against anything. That's just you don't prefer something happen. That's it.
I prefer you washing your hands because of the germ.
Yeah, that's not an argument, dude. Who cares?
To TJump from Numenon. If you can be a brain in a vat, how do you know any of the inferences you're making aren't just false beliefs that the evil scientist is making you believe?
I can't believe I exist and be wrong. So even if I'm a brain in a vat, I can know that with certainty. And then from that, I can tell there's a difference between my imagination and reality. And then I can come up with a methodology to differentiate imagination from reality, which is a science. And that gives me justified reason to believe that there is an external world and science stuff.
Gotcha. And then Evan Lord had a question for TJump as well. And they were asking if eugenics is moral or immoral according to the moral field.
Eugenics would be immoral if you're killing conscious agents. If it's like fetuses which don't have any consciousness, then it's perfectly fine.
They were talking more about selective breeding.
What? Selected, like
that's what they wrote in the
sexual
thing.
Reproduction, like because
like selective breeding,
genetic engineering, like enhanced genetics.
Totally fine, 100% moral, 100%.
Gotcha. And then synaxis. This was for TJump as well, I think. Why do you deny the existence of logic?
Logic is a property of sentences, so it exists as a form of sentences. It doesn't exist independently as an abstract object anywhere.
Gotcha. And if anybody would like to raise their hand in the audience, feel free to raise your hand and we can go ahead and get you pulled up. And then, is it against the moral field to silence another person as it overrides the other person's will?
Yes.
Gotcha. And then, so that's all the text questions right now. As I said, though, feel free to submit some more. I'll go ahead and pull up Iconoclast.
Hey guys, I enjoyed the debate, but this is for TJump. This isn't about what you think is the truth of the matter as far as which moral system is accurate when describing the material reality that we exist in, but which would you prefer? Yours or Jimbob's?
Oh, mine, 100%. Mine says that forcing anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing is wrong, and the perfect moral world would be a world where essentially everybody gets their own universe, they can do anything they want with it, and it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. That's a far better system than Jimbob's. Jimbob's is crap.
What? I didn't present a system, but TJump, did you notice that your system includes having to say that pulling a kid, pulling a kid from the street who's about to get hit by a truck is actually immoral under your system?
It would be a justified immoral action because there's a more moral option in the best of all possible worlds, which would be like snap your fingers and then just.
Oh, you have access to all best possible worlds somehow? How'd you do that?
That's literally the definition of what morality is. When it means objective morality, it's moral in all possible worlds, including.
I asked you, how do you have access to all possible worlds? You said that's the definition. You're just a
yes.
But isn't logic just a property of a sentence?
Yes, logic is a property of a sentence, and it can still be used to know things.
So what does it mean when you say it's just logic?
So
that
logic
is just a property of a sentence? Or does it round out?
What does that even mean anything? So logic, Jimbob asked, how do you have access to a world where you have all power? I said logic. You can use logic in order to imagine a world where you have infinite power, where all logically possible things can be done. And in this world, you want to know what objective morality is. Objective morality is what's moral in all possible worlds, including this world. If you were in this world and there was a car going towards a kid and he was about to be hit and you smacked the kid out of the way, that would be immoral because you have access to a less immoral option, which is teleport the kid or make the kid immoral or stop the car because you're all powerful. And so because you have access to a more moral option, doing something that is less moral is literally by definition immoral. So yes, the only thing that would be moral by my definition would be is the thing you could do if you were all powerful.
Isn't the only actualized potential moral world is the one where only you exist, though?
What? Say that again.
Isn't the only possible best possible world under your moral theory is a world where only you exist, right? That only your will is fulfilled, right?
No,
Of
will.
course it is. No, if you have wills that counter to yours, then you're in trouble.
No, the most moral world would be the most amount
dude.
of wills. Like, no, because if there's one will and one will is being maximized, that's not as good as if there's two wills and two wills are being maximized. Which is not as good if there's three
contradictory wills, dude. Hello.
There's no problem. There's literally no contradiction there because they can't impose on other people's wills. It's in the definition. So you can have infinitely many wills.
What? Okay. You just said, dude, that two wills can counter each other, which is why you said me imposing my will on another person is immoral because I'm imposing my will on them. But I'm actually, to be stopped, someone has to impose on my will to impose on their will. And you said that's justified.
In the best of all possible worlds, and you have your own universe, no one can impose on your will, even if they want.
Just agreed, your own universe. You just answered my question. The best possible world is you, TJump, your own universe, right? You just said it. You just said it, you sophist.
Bob, every consciousness gets the universe.
Sophist, dude.
All of them.
You're
infinitely many universes, infinitely many people, not just one.
Great moral model. Infinite universe is great. Good job.
Yes. Everybody gets the universe, Jim Bob, including
everyone
you.
Gets everyone gets the universe.
Yes, that's what morality would look like, Jim Bob.
Yeah, that's what I just said. Isn't the best possible world a world in which you have your own universe? That's your universe. You said no, and now you just said
you said you were the only one.
What does your own universe mean?
It's like a house. Everyone has their own set of things they can do stuff with, and we're going to have the size of a universe.
Yeah, that means your will supersedes all will. That's your best possible world, right?
Everybody gets an equally big universe, Jim Bob. I don't supersede anybody.
Are they in the same universe, in the same house?
No, they're in their own universe, Jim Bob.
Yeah, no shit. That means the best possible world is where you, TJump, have your own universe.
Yeah, obviously, yes. If it's just
you said no.
Your own universe. No, you said only person in the universe. That's wrong. You can have as many.
How is that not sophistry?
That is
sophistry. Is lying.
He's a nonsense machine.
Not the word.
Okay, so this section is a little bit more for the audience. It's okay to have a little bit of a back and forth because sometimes you might want clarification on something. But Iconoclast, are there any more questions you'd like to ask, or?
No, that was really it. Thanks for having me up to ask.
Yep.
And I guess I'll go enjoy my universe. I didn't know I had this.
Thank you for coming up, Iconoclast. The next person was Hecaton. What's going on, Hecaton?
Hey, thanks for having me up. I was just curious about kind of the last question that got cut off from the interrogation. I was wondering, like, TJump, by your own admission, you kind of said when you've got someone who wills an action against like another person who has a will for you not to do that action, it just seems like whether the action is performed or not, one will is not going to be fulfilled and the other one is. And I'm just saying, like, wouldn't that be like, wouldn't doing the action or not doing the action produce the same level of like morality or immorality?
No, because as I mentioned before, in my definition of will, which is proprietary to my model of morality, so the definition of will only applies to yourself and your will. So if you will something related to somebody else or somebody else's will, it's not a part of your will anymore. It's a part of their will because you're willing something about their will. And so it's not a restriction of your will because you're willing something about somebody else's will. So in my definition of will, in my model, literally willing something about somebody else will never be an imposition of your will because it's not about your will, it's about theirs.
Is it the case, just to clarify, is it the case that you need to be aware that it influences someone else's will? Like, as in, if I didn't know that it had that impact, in what sense am I willing against someone else's will? Like, I'm not doing that intentionally, right?
It doesn't matter if it's knowing or not. If you harm somebody else or restrict somebody else's will, it would be immoral, even if you know it or not. But if like if a rock falls on somebody, that would be immoral. So all of those things would be impossible in the best of all possible worlds.
Wait, so you're saying like every action could be immoral?
If it imposes on somebody's will, yeah.
But, yeah, so in most actions will do that, right?
No.
Well, how would you know though?
Well, whether you know or not doesn't make a difference. The question is, does it? So like
you just said
my nose.
Yeah.
Like if I sneak into someone's plane seat right before them and it looks like they're about to take it and I just am faster, is that an imposition of will?
Yes, probably.
It is?
Yeah, probably. I mean, they will have that seat. And
so are you arguing that survival of the fittest is immoral?
Absolutely, 100%.
So evolution, the process, is immoral.
100% horribly immoral. Like, yeah, that's
It's
pretty
immoral.
well accepted.
Interesting. So you're saying what
But
happens
that's,
in the
Bob,
world?
that's not the question. The
Is
guy's
water
question.
boiling? Is water boiling immoral?
No, because it doesn't have a will.
Okay, well, last question, and then I'm done. Thanks for clarifying. Do you think it's more immoral if you know that your action will be an imposition of will, or do you think it's equally immoral if you know or don't know?
Equally as immoral. It's relative to the effect on the will who you're harming. Your intention or knowledge is irrelevant. Like, you could intend to harm someone's will, but actually help their will, in which case you're doing a moral action. Well, your intention isn't really relevant.
You said
so you could
evolution is
accidentally do moral. You could accidentally be moral, and you could accidentally be immoral. Like,
Yes,
most of your
100%.
actions could fall into. Okay, all right, cool. Thanks, Taco. I didn't have any more questions, man.
Thank you, Hekaton. Then we've got a couple more text questions, and then I'll pull up another guess. So, TJump, Josh Ritchie was asking, do you remember when you said reality is reality? Do you still stand by this?
Yes, reality is still reality. Yes.
Gotcha. And then Awesome Graham was asking, TJump, are you saying the data we use to determine what is moral is what the majority of people have come to grip on?
Not about agreement. Agreement doesn't matter. It's about the data of the past. So the abundance of the only data we have about morality right now is moral intuition and moral progress. We haven't demonstrated it exists empirically yet. So the only thing we have to go off of is the philosophical dilemmas, moral intuitions of all the people in the past, and moral progress of people in the past. That's all we have to go off of. That is the field of ethics.
Gotcha. And then let me see. I'll find a question for Jimbob here. JCC probably is going to have a question for Jimbob here, so we can get one on both sides. What's going on, JCC? You're muted.
Hey, not much. Just enjoying this debate. Well, actually, my question is actually for both. I didn't hear the debate actually get to the point of whether or not morality can be reduced to the physical. So I'm curious about that.
My intro covered that.
I missed your intro. Forgive me. Sorry.
Okay. Jimbob, did you want to go?
Yeah. His intro stated that he believes all these other things are reduced to physicality, so why not morality is the assumption. The question is whether or not other things actually do in fact reduce to material or physical. But further, the cross-examination that I brought was if morality as a field from Tom's view is akin to gravity having an effect on objects, it's true that gravity, as it's described, imposes on the will of people and agents. And so I asked him a distinction. What's different about the moral field such that he knows that it doesn't impose on agents equally or at all or some and not the others? Because if it were the case that a moral field was a law of nature akin to gravity, then it itself would impose on people. It would be immoral itself if it imposed on people. So I tried to get down to the root. How does he know when the moral field is affecting something and when it's not? And that's when it got into moral intuition, which then got into basically two intuitions having contradictory views of progress.
All right, so my answer was that there's only evidence of physical things. There's no evidence of non-physical things in any field anywhere. So if you want to say that there is a non-physical grounds of morality, first you need to demonstrate that non-physical things exist and what their properties are and what kind of substances or ontology that exists in before you can say that anything is grounded in them, much less morality. Jimbob's answer, the answer to Jimbob's question was that not all laws impose on people's will. Gravity does. But so if morality is a law that doesn't impose on people, it's perfectly fine. So not all laws impose on people. It's one of the ones that doesn't. And how do you tell? You look at patterns in moral intuition and moral progress.
Gotcha. Does that answer your question appropriately, JCC?
Yep. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, JCC. And then I believe Wi-Fi Gospel was up next. He raised and lowered his hand a bit, but he's been waiting for a while.
Hey, thank you, Breakfast Tacos. What's up, guys?
Amen.
So I have a question for TJump. So I'm walking through Walmart right now, and as a good American, I got that thing on me, you know. And so let's say somebody came in here and wanted to unalive all of us.
Yes, it would be immoral to kill them, but it would be a justified immoral action because you're doing it
Right.
to save the lives of the innocent people. So even though
Okay.
it's immoral to kill them, it would be more immoral to let them kill other people.
What? Well, wouldn't I not be imposing on anybody's will if I just left it alone?
Yes, but the immoral action would be caused by him. So he would be doing immoral actions that's greater than you would be doing. So yes, you wouldn't be immoral if you did nothing, but
Right,
you would
so
prevent
better than nothing.
prevent more immoral actions if you did do something.
But for me personally, it would be better to not do anything, morally speaking.
I don't know if better or not. I don't think it's better or worse, but you'd be less immoral. Yeah.
Okay, so better. Thank you, guys.
TJump, I have an additional
Wi-Fi.
question. If my will is to become an avocado, actually,
Yes, it would be immoral for the universe to prevent you from becoming an avocado.
so the laws of logic are immoral now.
No, there's no logical contradiction with you becoming an avocado.
What?
There's no logical contradiction with you becoming an avocado. That is not a logical thing. So there's no laws of logic preventing you from becoming an avocado.
From being
Laws of
okay.
physics are.
Okay. So no, there's not a logical problem with me being both a human and an avocado.
Yeah, no, there would be a problem there. No.
There's no logical problem with me being both a human and an avocado.
Correct. There would be no problem with that.
No logical problem.
Correct. Like
Okay.
you could splice the two
I'm just
in a
making sure.
sci-fi movie. There's no problem there.
I'm just making sure.
Like, there can be a conscious avocado. There's no logical contradiction there.
Oh no, I didn't say a conscious avocado. I said a human being who's also 100% an avocado.
Yes, you could do that. You can like just
Yeah, we
take
can do that. Right?
avocado-ness, and then make human beings out of them. Yeah, you can have
interesting.
ape avocados. Sure, not a
Cool.
problem.
Cool.
I'd be a little creative there. It's not too hard.
Yeah.
And then TJump, I believe this one's for you as well. How do you measure moral progress through time?
You look at the amount of power a society has relative to like resources and see what kind of changes the society makes when it has more resources. And if all the societies make the same kinds of changes as they gain more resources, then you can see that that's progress. And you can measure it relative to the amount of power they have. Like a doctor in the 1800s can cut your leg off and it's totally fine, but a modern doctor can't cut your leg off anywhere in the world. It would be considered immoral. And that is a pattern of moral progress.
Gotcha. And then we've got Wise Ape, who I know is an atheist, so maybe Jim Bob's first or second question. Maybe he's asking TJump. What's going on, Wise Ape?
Hey, yeah, this is for both people if they feel like answering. Is it moral to enter into contract where you agree to submit to your husband? And then, is it moral, right, to not submit, divorce him, and take half his assets and collect alimony?
I think it's more for TJump.
I think that's more for JimBob. I think that's a question critiquing the Christian view of morality.
It's already outside of the Christian view of what it sounds like he's referring to, like a marriage, basically. But that wouldn't be
biblical. It would definitely be biblical. But
are you going to let me answer or
sure,
what?
go ahead.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, the question is about just an ordinary a contract that happens to be about a relationship and what constitutes the relationship and its behaviors. If you were presenting that as marriage, it would be inconsistent with my view of what marriage is. From my view, you're just talking about sort of like a legally binding contract that doesn't even have to be called a marriage or not. It sounds like your question could include someone who's not a wife or even your quote romantic partner that could apply to as well, right? The same conditions through a contract.
Well, to clarify, like the contract says you agreed to submit to your husband, right?
Submit, right? Yeah, I mean, under my view, the marriage itself
is that moral? Is that moral to enter into that contract, right? Because you'll be offering up your will to your husbands, and if so, right, then is it moral then to not submit?
Well, from my view, it's moral to submit even without the contract. That's what a marriage would definitionally be, from my view. So it'd be a contradiction to get married under my view and not be submitting. But just so you know, the man is also submitting as well, not to the woman, but submitting to something higher as well. So that submission is a part of the marriage act itself, the action itself. So, but Tom can answer it from his moral field theory, how you navigate through contracts that
But the man doesn't have an option not to submit unless he wants to be burned in God's basement.
No, that's a straw man. So you can come back with a serious question, or just ask Tom what your question is.
I think that was a good burn on Christianity. But my answer would be is that
What's
you can
Christianity,
consent.
Tom?
It's stupid. That's what it is.
Cool.
My answer would be shush. I'm answering the question, Jim Bob.
You're retarded.
If you consent, says
Come
Jim
on.
Bob, like pot calling the kettle black much, Jim Bob.
If you can get a sentence out.
You can consent to give away all of your rights. You can consent to be a slave if you want to, and that's you have the right to do what you want with your level of consent. And so it's perfectly moral to enter into a contract where you become a slave. I wouldn't suggest it, but you can do so if you so want to do so. And then in the case of you trying to violate your own contract, that would be a violation of your own will because you agreed to the contract, as long as you agreed to it fully with full knowledge of what the implications were.
Okay, and thank you, Wise Ape. We'll go ahead and move on to the next question. Appreciate you coming up. Looks like Nick's up next. What's going on, Nick?
I heard a comment about demonstrating immaterial concepts or immaterial things.
Immaterial things that exist.
Yeah, so I was late to the debate, but at the top of my Discord, it seems to say, does morality reduce to the physical in English? So if I were to take a screenshot, print out the screenshot, is morality identical to the letters morality?
No. The word represents
So what's
the
morality?
object. Physical field, like any physical field.
Okay, so morality is a concept. It's not identical to the letters spelling out the word. Words are immaterial concepts too, as is language.
No, those are material. They're all just things in your head.
How are things in my head physical?
It's called a brain. You got neurons, brain. Yeah.
But the concept of morality isn't identical to whatever kind of idea you have about neurons firing in the brain.
Right. There are things that exist in reality, like laws of physics, and you have ideas about them in your head, but the things in physics exist independently. Morality is like one of the physics things that exists independent of what anybody thinks about it. That's what makes it objective.
Morality in physics?
Yes.
I mean, sorry, Jim Bob, that you had to deal with this, but I was just reminded of the idea that, words are not material, and language itself presupposes logic. So everybody, the presuppers. Everybody presupposes things. So I just thought that was interesting when you brought up the need to demonstrate that immaterial things exist. But then we have the issue
you have failed to do because language, physics, those are all physical things, ideas, physics is pretty well accepted in pretty much every field of science. And if you don't know that, that's on you.
Oh,
fair enough. Well, there was another thing you were mentioning several other concepts that I thought I'd bring up, but you said that the morality is relative to the effect. And
how immoral something is relative to how bad you hurt somebody. Yes. So the amount of the morality is relative to how badly you hurt someone. Yes, that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah, but your comment just reminded me of like the concept of relativism, and if you're aware of relativism.
Relativism is a kind of subjective morality, and there's absolutely no connection there to saying that the amount something is immoral is relative to the amount of harm caused. It doesn't mean that morality itself is relative. Using the word
Yeah,
relative,
but you
not apply-
saying the word relative just reminded me of the concept of relativism. I mean, don't you think that
words
your
can
view
be
boils
used
down to
in multiple
relativism?
ways. No, that's literally stupid. That's like if I said diletheism and you said, well, does that boil down to God? The fact that the word theism is there does not mean it boils down to God. Words have
I'm just
multiple
saying-
usages.
I'm just saying, when you made the comment, it made me say, oh, I'll ask TJump if he knows what relativism is and if he thinks that if your view is going to boil down to relativism, if you think that's problematic.
Yes, I just answered that. So like if I say diletheism and that reminds you of the word theism and says, oh, maybe I'll ask TJump if he knows what the word theism means and he's ever heard of theism, and maybe does diletheism reduce to theism? And he's going to be like, that's fucking stupid.
So I'll just ask you, is relativism, when it comes to morality, a problem?
Sure.
Because if there's no standard by which we're judging moral
Yes,
or
I'm a
immoral
realist.
acts,
Moral
then
realist.
why does it matter?
I'm a moral realist, objective morality. I'm not a moral relativist.
How?
It's the consensus among naturalists, among atheists, and
Consensus can
Yes.
change.
Jim Bob, that's irrelevant to the question. So he
And if
asked how.
consensus can change, then it's relative.
No, literally
Yes,
not.
it is. Literally is.
Jim
If
Bob,
consensus can change and
Shut up. I'm gonna
contradicts a previous view, I'm going to mute you. I'm going to mute you. You're such a
Mute Jim
you're
Bob on
such
my
a
end so I
pussy.
can answer the question. All
You're
right, so
you're such a failure.
relativism would be a version of subjective morality. I'm a moral realist, a moral naturalist, which is the consensus among philosophers in ethics, which most philosophers
Well,
are.
I mean, Jim
How
Bob was being
is
more
that-
charitable with you because somebody could just say, appeal to experts,
Stop,
appeal
stop,
to
stop,
consensus.
stop
Those are
talking.
fallacies.
Mute you as well until I get the
They're
finish.
just
Just gonna
fallacies.
mute everybody.
No.
He just mutes everyone, dude.
They're just fallacies,
because-
man. But
There are different
Everyone.
models of morality that are
Godspeed,
not theist
Jim
models
Bob.
of morality,
Godspeed, man.
like moral naturalism.
Sofas, dude.
You can have models of objective morality without God, because God doesn't even work as a model of objective morality. It's likely the worst model of objective morality in academic philosophy, and you can check the polls on that. Phil Survey's paper shows that there are many different models of objective morality, and God is the crappiest one.
Yeah, but most people
go ahead.
believe in God, though. Still.
Yes, but not most experts.
But they're experts in believing in God, so therefore it's
What?
true from your view.
Experts in believing in God.
Yeah, they're
Genius. That is-
experts in believing in God. Yeah, from your view.
I'm an expert in believing there is no God.
Yeah,
therefore God doesn't
they have a philosophy that God exists. You have a philosophy that he doesn't, and there's more people who believe in God than the experts you listed.
Yes, but we care about what people who know about reality think, not
Is
what people
caring
who know
is
about
caring
theory.
physical? Is caring physical?
Yes, caring is physical.
What's care made out of if it's physical?
Neurons in the brain, emotions.
Oh, care.
chemicals.
Yeah, care is also
Oxytocin,
neuron. Okay, how about
Sacrifice-
two?
Okay,
How about two
and
brother?
we'll go ahead and move on to the next audience questions. So we had retro video. This one was for Jim Bob. Do you think the majority of humanity has gotten more or less moral since the dawn of civilization?
I would say more moral over time. In resolution. So the morality that was ascertained of the time perhaps was appropriate for the time, but overall I would say to say there's any moral progress at all, that there's some sort of higher resolution that's being apprehended. So I agree that the resolution in which we're apprehending truth and morality is increased.
Okay, and then we have without lies, Islam dies, which I think this is a pretty good question. Can both sides steelman the other side's position? And I guess we'll start with TJump on that and then move over to MadeByJimbob just because of affirmative and negative.
Oh, Jim Bob has the classical theist view that there's non-physical abstract objects, and this non-physical abstract object realm includes things like consciousness and morality, and there's no basis or reality or evidence for that whatsoever.
Okay, and then Jim Bob?
Steelman, T-Dump's argument is that morality is a type of physical field that exists in nature, and from his view, has some type of effect on some objects and doesn't have the same effect on other objects. And his view is that if morality exists, it has to be reduced to physicality because everything that exists is physical. and that's his view. That's his view, is that everything's physical, including propositions and evaluations and all of these things. And so from his view, he's going to figure out what the most moral position is based on looking at hard reality, concrete reality, patterns and trends, combined with moral intuitions to arrive at the most moralist positionist. And he believes that that's possible through that shitty metaphysics.
Gotcha. Do you both feel like that was a fair Steelman?
Jimbob got most of it right, but he got one thing wrong where he says that the reason I think that everything reduces to matter is because it's not possible for there to be non-physical things. That's wrong. It's just the only evidence is for physical things. Everything else is just made up.
And Jimbob?
Yeah, I would just say that if it's added to his position that all things are made up, then philosophies themselves, which are not consolidated as physical matter, don't actually exist. They're also just made up. So his entire philosophy is just made up and not real because it consists of things that he can't demonstrate are physical.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Philosophy is also made up. Yes.
Yeah,
that's
totally
true.
made up. Your whole philosophy doesn't exist. Gotcha. Cool.
I was asking if his Steelman of you was a fair Steelman.
Well, yeah, I mean, in a sense, if he said Jimbob holds a position that reality itself, a question someone asked on my side is, does exist include different types of existence? So my position is that there's a way in which material things exist, and then there's a way in which non-material things exist. So to say, give me evidence for the non-material things, and then I'll believe they exist, is just question begging for materialism and physicalism. So when we point to things like information, knowledge, truth, evaluations, propositions, these things, meaning, these things don't exist as material objects. So I believe that there's types of existence in this reality, and it's not reduced to physical. And to argue otherwise, my position is that you're going to appeal to things that you don't believe exist. To even argue,
I think the question was, did I accurately represent your worldview?
No. Yeah, no, I'm restating what my worldview is accurately so people can hear it better.
Gotcha. And then we've got a few more voice questions. How much longer are y'all all right with going to the voice questions?
I'm good until there's no more voice questions.
And TJump?
My voice goes out.
We've got Evan Gamer. Hey, Evan.
Hello. Sorry about my voice. I'm recovering from a cold.
Me too.
TJump. I heard that you correct me if I'm wrong, because this will influence the question. You said that you take your view of moral progress by powerful entities, countries, and at the most prosperous, and see what they do. And as time goes on, you see the changes that they do, and you see those as what is moral, correct?
No. So we see as societies increase in the amounts of power they have from all levels, whether it's big or small, how do they change their views on morality as they gain more power?
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. On that note, it seems that every society, and I mean every society, from big empires to small independent city states, they all focus on increasing a big core population, whether it's a culture, ethnicity, race, or whatever, and they go and they try to increase it. And it seems that they go and they try to oppress and assimilate other groups at its leisure. And problematic groups of society, they either deal with them through oppression, or at the most charitable, they go and they isolate them into individual pockets, but limit their growth so that they can easily be crushed if they become a problem. With that being said, how is LGBT and some other more progressive things that happen now in the West, how is that seen as moral progress if it goes against this common trend of societal stability or country stability?
Societal stability has nothing to do with morality. It's not seen as having anything to do with morality. It's a different topic. And so if we're thinking about morality, does giving more individual rights and more individual freedoms follow the pattern of morality? Yeah, absolutely. But nobody thinks that getting a bigger population is related to morality. Like, that's not a thing. That's not a moral belief people have. So you're comparing the societal growth of the population size, which doesn't have anything to do with moral intuition, to individual rights and freedoms, which does have to do with things to moral intuition. So even if the individual rights contradict the population, it's not related to morality.
I just remember you saying earlier that you take these marks of progress as like data points to which you see where progress is moving. You also said that you take the opinion of experts, and you also try to compile that into an objective morality. So it just seems like some stuff like that throughout history. Like I know in China right now, it is a major part of their cultural tradition that the Han core is maintained and expanded, and that the Chinization or the Sinization of other cultures and groups that is seen as moral and good through Confucianism and other societal groups. And that's just one example. There's other societies where like in Iran, seeing the personization of like other outside groups is seen as preferable. And in Germany, during like the height of their empire, Germanization was seen as good. Even the Western Slavs, they want to become more German and stuff like that. So I think I grasp your morality. I just don't see how you can it just seems like a cognitive dissonance on your part. Or
No, you're just wrong. None of those things are seen as moral. Success isn't seen as moral. So you're confusing social success with intuitions of morality, and that's just wrong.
Okay. From like the examples you've listed, you said how some things are not how some things are immoral, but they're justified because they bring about more moral things. Like killing a killer is good because it stops the killer from killing more people, even though killing
Less
in
immoral.
itself is wrong, right?
It's less immoral. It's not good. It's less immoral.
So I guess I'm having trouble comprehending like what is moral versus what is less moral. Like what is how that works under your position.
Less imposition of will is less immoral.
Okay. And with that, how does that go, and how is that related to like a physical field? Because from what I see in kind of like physics in the universe, things that is more successful and things that happen more often, that has more proof than things where that are more arbitrary and appear like sorry. I think
Does
you
not
get
make
the
sense.
point.
Not really. No, that didn't really make
Sorry.
sense. So yeah, there's only evidence of physical things. So if you think anything that we don't know about, it's probably physical. There's
Wait,
no reason to
evidence
think it's not
exists?
physical
Wait, does evidence exist?
as a property of senses.
So does evidence exist physically?
Yeah, certain things exist that are evidence, like fossils.
What's
Yeah,
evidence made out of if it exists?
fossils matter.
If evidence itself, evidence, the term, is physical, what is evidence made out of?
Evidence itself is the term isn't physical, but certain things are physical that are evidence.
No, so if evidence doesn't exist, then what are you referring to?
Evidence, the logical term, doesn't exist. It's just a
So evidence doesn't exist. So when you say give me evidence, so when you say give me evidence, you're saying give me
Jimbob is
something that
muted,
doesn't
so I can
exist.
finish the
Great work,
question.
dude.
So, the word evidence is an abstract term that doesn't exist out of our imagination.
So show me
but
evidence
it
means
refers to
nothing.
particulars like fossils, which do exist and are physical. Problem solved. Easy.
So fossils are identical to evidence, even though all fossils are not evidence.
Thank you, Evan.
All fossils are evidence of evolution.
For what? For what?
Evolution. For evolution.
No, we're not talking about evolution. We're talking about whether or
All
not there's evidence.
fossils are
Dude,
evidence.
are you
of
this
evolution.
dumb? We're talking
What?
about whether or not there's evidence for the term for evidence itself. You said, "Show me evidence." I said,
evidence? That
"Look,
doesn't
dude,
make
it's
any
simple."
sense.
I said, "Yeah, it doesn't make sense." I know. If you say, "Show me evidence," and I'll believe it. I asked you, "Is evidence itself something that exists?" You said, "No."
Evidence as a concept doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's an idea.
So
in the
show
brain.
me something that doesn't exist. Great work.
So we've
It
already.
exists as a concept. It means the thing in the
Doesn't
brain. So you have
exist. Though.
neurons.
Show me something that doesn't exist. Is what you're asking?
No, I'm
There it
asking
is.
for particulars to which the concept refers. So if I say, show me a rock,
Oh.
I'm not asking you to show me the concept of rock. I'm saying pick up one of the particulars to which this word refers to. So if I say, show me evidence, I'm talking about show me a particular to which this abstract word refers to.
Does that exist, like, in the real world?
Yes, those are physical data points that physically exist.
So progress exists in the real world, okay. And another point, does love at first sight exist?
Possibly.
Like, physically?
Yeah, if it existed, it would be physical.
So, like, where does it exist?
In the brain, very simple.
Oh, in the brain?
Yep, in the brain.
Have you ever had love at first sight, TJump?
No.
Have you ever had love for like a mother or a sister or a girlfriend?
Sure.
Or a boyfriend?
Sure.
And where was that? Like physically in the world, in your brain?
Literally, it's oxytocin. We have already solved that one. We know exactly what it is in the brain.
Okay, that's
So if I get oxytocin,
I wonder
doing
what does
something
Jimbob have to think?
I was saying, if I receive oxytocin from doing something horrific to someone, is that love?
Yep.
If it's the same chemical?
Yep.
Great.
It's not different at all, like if you have love for your mother.
Amazing.
That's correct. Your brain can cause you to
Wow.
feel different things from different kinds of experiences. That's how evolution works. Congratulations.
So for which reasons do you
How
think it
evolution works.
is? For which reasons do you think you love your mother, TJump? Exactly.
Because I
which
get
reasons?
the emotions from the brain.
Why?
Because it's oxytocin.
But
That doesn't make
TJump,
sense.
you said evolution. Do you hold the position that that our wills and our intuitions are derivative or symptoms or effects of evolution?
Yes.
So if evolution, you said, is evil, and
Yep.
what it continues to do is produce your own will, isn't your own
Yep.
will evil?
Nope.
Yes, it is.
Nope. That's an origin fallacy.
No. What? What?
So that's an origin fallacy. This is very
where's
basic.
the distinction between evolution and your will? There's no distinction.
What's
Not an
your
origin.
will?
It's not an
Your
origin.
will
It's the
isn't
continuation.
evolution.
Are we
Your will
evolving right
isn't
now?
Evolution, Jim Bob. Shut
Are
up,
we
Jim Bob.
evolving right
All
now?
I'm going to mute
You're
Jim
done
Bob
with
so I can
toast
answer the
again,
question
dude.
again.
Again.
All right. So even if
Again.
evolution is immoral
Again.
and it does immoral things and it produces your brain, that doesn't mean that anything your brain produces by extension is immoral. It's just a composition fallacy.
So you're just declaring arbitrarily things that are produced by evolution, even though you said evolution is immoral. Right now, from your view, evolution is occurring and still producing without your knowledge. You're at the effect of evolution. That means that evolution, being the imposition of will, is actually producing what you believe to be your will, right? And you don't have a choice in the matter of what your will is. Therefore, your own will is at the effect of something that's evil, and you can't distinguish between your will as an effect of evolution itself. You can't actually go in and tell me which of your wills is not the product of this evil thing called evolution, and which.
Eva Sage, I'm inviting you up. While they're doing that, there was another text question. I'm trying to find it real fast. It's in the chat somewhere here. I can't find their name, but they were saying that because tag oftentimes will reference morality, they were asking if you could put tag into propositional logic form, Jim Bob.
What?
So they were saying that because oftentimes tag links back to the God thing in the argument. They would like you to put tag into propositional logic form.
Like two premises and a conclusion?
Yeah, like a syllogism.
Well, the syllogism, it goes as X is the necessary precondition for Y exists, therefore X. And then you would run supporting arguments for premise 1.
So they're asking for the semantics, with the semantics, not just the form of the argument?
Oh, include the words?
Yeah, the semantics and the form combined.
Okay. Yeah, something like God is the necessary precondition for truth. Truth exists, therefore God.
Gotcha, thank you. And then there was a bunch more for TJump. So how do you know the parameters for they phrase that poorly. So how do you know the parameters for objective morality are desirable? Because choosing impositions of will as immoral may have permutation consequences.
What?
He's asking, doesn't that assume you have the knowledge of the consequences if you don't know the future? I think he's asking. If it's a consequentialist position, ultimately, that X action causes harm, but you don't know it causes harm in the future. You could be wrong about that. I think he's asking about the knowledge of the future.
Well, imposition of will isn't harm. So, if you impose on someone's will, it doesn't really matter what happens in the future. I mean, if it imposes on more wills in the future, it'd be more immoral, sure. But if it imposes on a will now, it's immoral regardless of what happens in the future.
Gotcha. And then, let me see, I'll try to pull up another apophatic.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes. How's it going?
Very good, Taco. Thank you for bringing me up. I had 2 questions for TJump in particular. The first question that I had, that I think Jimbob tried to expand upon this, but I don't know if we got a clear answer. So, obviously you believe that morality is objective. That was a conversation. You made that pretty clear, right?
Yep.
So, how would you define objective?
True, independent of opinion.
Okay, so it's independent of opinion, right? Okay. My question is, how do you derive an ought from an is?
You don't need to.
What do you mean you don't need to?
If morality is true, you don't need an ought in it. You can add the oughts, but you don't need to. So, the proof that you don't need an ought is something good because you ought to do it, or ought you do it because it's good?
Okay, as I said, we're questioning whether oughts exist even, right? So
you don't need them.
How if morality is merely reducible to the physical, right? How can you derive what we should do from a fact about the world, such as your chemicals in your brain?
Yeah, oughts don't matter. You don't need oughts for morality. It's there's several papers on this academically. You don't need oughts.
Okay, I don't care about the papers. I care about the argument.
Yeah, so that's the second part. So oughts, as I said, is something good because you ought do it, or ought you do it because it's good? If something is good because you ought do it, then oughts are intrinsic to morality, which doesn't work. If you ought to do something because it's good, then oughts are extrinsic to morality, and you don't need oughts for morality, so oughts are just irrelevant to morality. Problem solved.
Okay, so the second question I would like to ask, all right, if morality in ethics is merely reducible to one's own brain chemicals or their mind or their feelings that they have within their mind,
that would be subjective.
Yeah, how is that not subjective or relative based on opinion?
It would be subjective. My model of morality is that it's a law of physics, so it's not in minds.
Okay, so your morality is the law of physics, right? So the real question is that if it's based on matter, what material is it reducible to? You haven't answered that question. The only question that you answered was the brain.
Like a law of physics. It's very, very simple. Use your brain. You're so dumb.
Laws of physics are imposed on people's will, though. So you haven't told
Not
us
all.
what.
I covered this. Not all.
I didn't
not
say,
all.
dude.
Solved.
Everything we know about the laws of physics impose on our will, and so you're just special pleading with morality and saying, "Well, mine doesn't," and you haven't told us how because you can't even tell us what matter it's reduced to.
No, not all laws of physics do.
Okay, I know he said not to go into a cross-examination, but I don't think you really actually answered my question, right? Because you're saying that it's reducible to laws of physics.
I literally answered your question. You're
People,
just too stupid to
how
understand.
can people
So,
share a morality
you're
if it's
muted,
reduced to the physical?
You're muted.
So he's muting
this
you
is
too.
very,
This
very
guy is
simple.
such a joke, dude.
Muted.
Do you take the neurons out of my
Okay.
brain?
Laws of physics are literally
He's imposing your
physical
will. He's
fields.
imposing on your will
quantum-
right now.
like gravity is a physical field. Electromagnetism is a physical field. Morality is a physical field. Problem solved.
How do you
Neurons
measure
in
That's
your
an
it?
brain in
assertion.
5
That's
seconds
an
of thinking
assertion,
solves the
dude.
problem.
That's an assertion. He's asking you to justify the assertion.
But
They
that's
know
what
it's
it
a
was.
physical field. Where is it that it's a physical field? The other ones you claimed you can interact with. We're asking you. Your claim
They're
is
the
that
exact
morality is a
same as
physical
every
field.
other physical field. They're everywhere
Yeah,
in the universe.
where? Yeah, that says nothing.
Everywhere.
Tells
They're everywhere.
you everywhere. So that doesn't tell us how you interacted with it.
I interacted with it. I
How
didn't
do you
interact
know
with
it's a
it. What are you talking
physical
about?
field?
That's the hypothesis.
How do you know? You said it is, right? You said it is.
Yeah,
Do you know
That's
it
the
is?
hypothesis.
So you don't know.
No, I don't know. Hypothesis.
Okay. Oh, you're just making it up. Cool.
What? I don't think you really answered how you measure it, T-Jump. If it's like physical and it's like a physical field, where can you measure this at?
Never said you could measure it. Like, what are you talking about?
Okay, so it's not limited to the physical if you can't measure it. Excuse me?
No, there's lots of things in the physical you can't measure, dumbass. Try again.
Are you sure about that? A physical
Yes,
field?
I'm
You can't
100%
measure a physical field?
Yes, there's lots of things you can't measure, moron. It's literally, there are
Name one.
literal principles that you can't
Like a
measure
physical...
Like what?
What physical field can't you measure?
Heisenberg uncertainty principle. You literally can't measure
Principle?
the particle's position and speed at the same time. There are lots of things you can't measure. Quantum randomness you can't measure. There's lots of things you can't measure that are physical. You guys are just morons. Next.
Okay, I guess I'm a moron. I'll get it down, Taco.
Thank you, Apophatic.
No
Have a good
problem.
one. And then I think we might have a question for Jim Bob. I see B.S. Lewis in the audience. He's a friend of both.
Fan. Huge fan.
Me too. Me too. I love B.S. Lewis's videos. I invited you up. You just got to hit the green button.
Yeah, I get it. I got it.
Amen.
Sorry. I'm just nervous because I'm a big fan of everybody on the stage here, man. You guys are all the greatest. I just got a quick yes or no question for both the debaters here. Does the tooth fairy exist? I'll take my answer off the stage.
Thank you, B.S. T-Jump first,
Only as an idea in the brain.
and then made by Jim Bob.
I agree so far as an idea in the brain.
Perfect. And then there was another question for T-Jump. Is it morally excusable for technocrats to rule society?
Whether or not they rule society isn't necessarily moral or immoral.
Gotcha. And then there's...
I have just a follow-up question. I won't do a cross-examine. I just want to know from your view, Tom Jump, that is it better from your moral field theory that society is actually organized with law that has the ability to impose on will, like if needed? Is that better, or is it better under your view that it's completely like anarchistic and just kind of like wild?
Justified immoral actions are good. So prison, while it is an immoral thing, prevents greater immorality by existing than not existing.
Okay. And so if you know that it's better for society to be set up with this, let's say a monopoly of force, then is there the most moral way to determine who gets to set up the society and what influences and informs the laws of the society? Like, how do you determine that from your moral field theory?
You would determine that based off of the data of what works best in societies to produce the least imposition of will. So, like, which ones have the best healthcare, which is not the U.S. Which ones have the lowest crime rate, not the U.S.
Well,
Which ones
the
have
least
best
imposition
education,
of
not the
will
US.
would be anarchy, though. That would be the least imposition of will.
That would
Your
not
government would
least-
be the least imposition of will.
No.
Yes, it would.
No, because we can't free ourselves from nature.
Okay, I won't make this a cross-examination, but you just said morality itself is nature. So how could something?
A law.
How do you free yourself from nature if that's the moral thing to do? If nature itself, from your view, is morality, morality is
So
nature.
the reason we don't go with anarchy is because in an anarchic system, there are things in nature that restrict our wills more than other people, like food. And so we need a government to produce or fight against those things to prevent more immorality. And so if we give up the government, we would have more immorality that happens, more impositions on our will that would occur in an anarchic system than would in a capitalist system.
Gotcha. And then the next question is going to be from Spyro. What's going on, Spyro?
Hey, you can hear me, right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, this one's for TJump. Hey, so the concept of having concepts in your brain, which kind of reduces to physicality, is based on physics, right? TJump, is that kind of the line of thinking there?
It's a physical concept in your brain, sure.
Right. I'm just asking if it's based on physics,
I don't know what that
scientific.
means, based on physics.
Well, I mean, could you have a brain without the concept of physics as like a scientific, method?
Yes.
Okay. And so how do physics have any relation then to anything that's conceptual or true in life?
Physics describes the things that govern reality, like laws of physics, and those produce brains. Problem solved.
Okay, cool. Can you describe to me what physics is? Can you explain it for the layman's?
The laws that govern reality. Kick him out. Bye-bye.
Ever. His entire...
All right. And then there were a few more questions in the text chat as well. We have a few people that are raising their hands for the second time. Do you guys want to take anybody that's raising their hand for the second time?
Sure, I don't care.
Cool. So Andy was asking for TJump, since there is no fact of the matter to be determined from the physical facts alone about what a speaker means by his utterances. How does one understand the moral field as objective?
The moral field has nothing to do with speakers. It has to do with a thing that exists. Physical law. So you would compare to the physical law, not what people say. Who cares what people say?
Comparing is someone saying something.
No.
No, you can compare something, and that's not a position about the physics.
Yeah, like if you hold one rock next to another rock, you've said nothing, but you are still comparing. So what you said makes no sense.
That's something inside your brain that you're doing. You're saying stuff in your brain about the objects, right?
Sure. What does this have to do with the question of what morality is?
Ask the question again. It just completely wrecks you. Ask it again.
No, it has nothing to do with it.
Ask it again. Ask it again.
Sure,
I want to hear it again for the audience.
He was asking, since there is no fact of the matter to be determined from the physical facts alone about what a speaker means by his utterances, how does one understand the moral field as objective?
If the moral field exists independent of anybody's utterances, there you go. Problem solved.
Gotcha. And then Wang Sunfa is asking, if everything is physical and all concepts are neurons, then will is neurons. Tens of thousands of neurons die every day. If will isn't consistent over time, why should morality be defined by it?
Because it is consistent over time. That's why there's objective morality. If there's a pattern in moral intuition and moral progress, that would be inconsistent over time. Problem solved.
And then NPM11 was saying, TJump, I treat patients that lack normal brain structures. These patients have dissimilar fMRI results, but conceive of similar concepts to normal patients. There is no universal neural network. Thoughts?
I mean, I agree. That's why I told JimBob earlier when he asked which neuron is an apple. I said it's different for everybody, so I agree.
Well, I just want to point out that I pointed that out, that you took a position of a particular when I say does truth exist? You say in the brain. When I say, well, under your view, truth exists in a brain in a very particular way. Now, the person who just posed the question pointed out that if truth exists only as a particular thing, there is no universal truth about the moral field. There's just TJump's physical brain fizzing, and there's no universality about his claims.
No, there'd still be a truth, a sentence to which corresponds to reality that would be true in each brain. individually, but it'd still be true individually in each brain.
Well, no, that you don't understand the entailment here. If it's only true in the brain and no truth statements, because no neurology is universal, if truth is identical to one's neurology and all neurology is different, there is no universal truth. It's the end of your argument and your moral theory, dude.
If the sentence "the sky is blue" is on the left side
Quit.
of your brain, or if it's on the right
Quit.
side of your brain, it's still
You gotta
true either
quit,
way.
dude.
Where it's located is irrelevant, Jim Bob. You're just dumb.
No, you don't understand. You don't
I
understand. what's
literally
going on.
understand. You just don't understand because you're stupid.
No, that's only a truth that exists in your head. It's a particular. Can't be
It's true.
universally
It
true.
exists,
That
it
I'm stupid.
exists in my head in
Yeah, but
one
it
location.
can't
and
be
exists
true
in your head in
universally,
a
though.
different location. It can.
Yeah, but
It
it's
can
not.
be
They're
true.
not the same things, though.
It can be in different locations and still be true universally. That's true, Jim Bob.
You
So,
don't have access to universal truths because they're all just particular statements in the brain.
doesn't matter.
You're
It can
cooked,
still be
dude.
true
You're super
universally,
cooked.
Jim Bob.
This
You
is
just crushed
this
it.
is
Done, Jim
no.
Bob. Done. You're done.
No.
You can go cry now. You can give up. You
And
lost.
then,
over, dude.
and then Austin
career's
Graham
over.
was asking, if we decriminalize theft resulting in less crime, does that mean that theft is moral?
No. Criminalization has nothing to do with morality.
Gotcha. And then Ixthus is the next person in the audience that hasn't been up, so I'll pull them up real fast. What's going on?
It's not going to get some more water.
Yeah, absolutely. You can have a moment.
You just said criminalization has nothing to do with morality. And just 2 minutes ago, he said jailing people is the most moral thing because over time, it actually reduces the imposition of will. So it has to do with morality when he says so. But when it's a question he has to answer, it doesn't have anything to do with morality.
Who's your question for, Ixthus?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify my question. I was one that asked, since there is no fact of the matter to be determined from the physical facts alone about what a speaker means by his utterances, how does one
Gotcha.
understand the moral field as objective? It's not about the utterance, it's about the meaning.
TJump will be
semantics.
right back, so hang on for just a moment.
Sure.
He was just going to get some water.
All right, I'm back.
Ixthus?
Yeah.
Yeah, you wanted to clarify your text question?
Oh, is he back? Yeah.
Yep.
What's the text question?
Yeah. So I just was curious. You kind of answered my question by addressing the utterances. So if you don't mind, I'll just read it really quick. It was, since there is no fact of the matter to be determined from the physical facts alone about what a speaker means by his utterances, how does one understand the moral field as objective? So it's more about the meaning, right? If all facts are physical, then meaning itself isn't an objective fact. So I'm following Quine and Kripke here.
Okay, so even if meaning is meaningless, whether or not a thing objectively exists would be true independent of whether or not we had meaning. So even if we had no meaning, the law of gravity would exist. So if the law of morality is objective and exists independent of any language games we play, then the language games are irrelevant. We don't really care. Like that would be relevant to our understanding and whether or not we can understand, but we don't really, that wouldn't make it less true.
So sorry, I missed the first spot. You were kind of quiet. Maybe that's on my end. Could you just repeat that one more time? I'll bump my volume.
Even if there is no meaning, meaning is just a figment of human imagination that doesn't make sense. Objects still exist, like the law of gravity. It still exists, even if there's no meaning. Their sentences, if they lose all meaning, will not deter physical objects from existing. So if morality is a physical object that exists, the language games are irrelevant.
So it seems like you're trying to dodge the meaning problem to me, right? So
No, the meaning problem is just irrelevant to questions of existence. It's two separate questions. So the meaning problem is only a problem if you're discussing things like definitions. If definitions have no objective meaning, then there's no objectively correct meaning to the definition.
You're saying the law of morality is like the law of gravity, right? But the law of gravity describes how objects behave. It doesn't prescribe.
The law of gravity is an actual existing physical field.
Sure, but it doesn't give prescriptions. So how does your moral law generate obligations is my question.
Well, again, obligations don't matter. So like I answered that before, oughts are irrelevant. You don't need oughts for morality. So it's just.
But then you're just stuck back on, can someone disobey gravity? And obviously the answer is no.
What?
And someone can disobey morality.
Yes. So what does that have to do with anything?
That your moral theory is not a moral theory.
No, it's still a moral theory. Whether or not people can obey is irrelevant to whether or not it's moral.
So what are they violating, though? What are they violating is his question. If they're violating the moral field, what does it look like to violate that?
Like going against the law of physics, sure.
Yeah, what does it look like for morality, though?
It would be like if gravity was so weak that it didn't affect you barely at all, and you could just jump as far as you wanted, and you just
No, that's referring to gravity. We're asking you to give an example of morality. What does it look like, fly on the wall, of someone violating the physical law of gravity?
No, that's why I gave the example of gravity. If gravity was so weak that it couldn't force you to do anything, that's like the law of morality. It's so weak it can't force you to do anything.
So give us an example in the world
Mm.
of the morality field being violated. What does it? We just failed.
Any example of being immoral would be a violation or a non-consistency with the law.
Show us an immoral act that you can actually point to the referent morality field being violated. Where?
Or if I could do that, I would have won a Nobel Prize. I never claimed to be able to do
The answer
that.
is you can't. That's a quick answer, TJump. Thank you.
I never claimed I could, so that's not an argument against my
Claiming
position.
morality as a field is claiming that. Yes, it is.
No, it's not, Jim Bob. Claiming morality as a field does not entail I can actually demonstrate the field in the lab, Jim Bob. Those are two different claims, Jim Bob.
Okay, buddy.
So, sorry, I'll step down after this, and I can step off the stage after this question. But I'm just confused if it's so weak. Morality doesn't even seem to actually bind us. Like morality seems like it needs to be strong enough to bind us to some sort of obligation. But
No, it doesn't. It just needs to determine truth. So if it determines the truth of what is moral or immoral, whether it forces us to do anything or not is irrelevant.
By truth, you mean one particular thing happening in one particular brain?
No,
Toast again. Bye-bye. Quit. You're over. It's done.
No,
Thank you,
Jim Bob,
Access.
that's stupid. If the sentence "this is moral" is true, that sentence is in your brain. Sure,
True
the
in
truth
one brain.
corresponds to reality, and that's all the part you need is the correspondence to reality.
Correspondence also happens in one brain.
No, correspondence does not happen.
Yeah, it does.
Jim. Correspondence doesn't.
How do you correspond to reality? How do you know it corresponds to reality without appealing to the brain?
Corresponds mean that the sentence accurately describes reality. That doesn't
how do you
happen
know
in your
that?
brain.
No. How do you know that corresponds
It
to
doesn't matter
reality?
how you know it, Jim Bob. Correspondence
Yeah, it doesn't matter now.
happen
Yeah,
in the
you're
brain.
you're so cooked,
Dumbass,
dude. It's
dumbass, Jim Bob. Correspondence does not happen in the brain. When a sentence corresponds, whether or not you know it is irrelevant. I can say a sentence I don't know corresponds, and it can still correspond. Correspondence doesn't happen in the brain. You're a dumbass, Jim Bob. Next.
Where does it happen?
All right. So we have Eva here. Eva had I'm not sure who your question's for.
It's for the topic of does morality reduce to the physical? I think it does. Modern neuroscience says something about that. And so I guess a question for Jim Bob would be, what do you say about the neuroscience?
You haven't said any neuroscience that finds morality in a brain. You just said neuroscience says stuff. Hold on, you said neuroscience says stuff. Jim Bob, what do you think about neuroscience saying stuff? Is this a level of fucking inquiry you guys do?
No, that was a legitimate
in
question.
neuroscience. In neuroscience, you can observe will. You put
really
instruments on your head, and you can get input. You get brain signals and energy going back and forth. And in neuroscience, you can actually see actions being done, memories being recalled, and that's will. You can observe will with neuroscience.
How do you know what part of the brain? How do you know to call will and what part you don't call will?
Easy. It's when you see energy in the orbital frontal cortex, and that energy travels to the nucleus accumbens, and from there it goes to. No, I'm explaining it. I'm explaining it to you.
You're just asserting the shit, dude. I asked you.
No.
How
This
do you know?
is actually a science that's observed, and there's documentation about it, and it's
You're
objective.
calling energy
There's multiple
intent.
people that are being tested.
How do you
It's
determine
electrical
which energy?
signals.
How do you determine which electrical signals and energy is intent and which aren't?
It's being observed live, and
That
you can
is not
see
an
it.
answer to the question. How do you determine what you're observing? Look, listen, real slow for you. You observe energy and neurology happening in the brain, right? Electrical circuits and all this stuff happening, right? You observe it. I'm asking you, how do you determine from what you're observing which of these signals and energy is, quote, intent and which isn't?
It's very simple.
It's easy when you see a result from it. Like, for example, if you
see the result from it, you guys.
see the energy where it results the user to move his hand from the apple to, like, see a different object. Like, if they ask them, hey, can you grab this green apple instead of the red one? You can observe it and you can replicate it by asking other test subjects.
How do you falsify?
You damage that part of the brain, and they stop
No,
being able to do
that's a
things.
medium. You're referring to the hardware. If you
My
Cool.
model of morality, Jimbo. That's not
fine.
the topic.
That's fine. TJump. He doesn't need to say it, your savior. You know, you just shut up. He's talking to me. Eva. So if it's the case that you're arguing morality is physical, from your view, if that's your claim, please tell me what physical properties or what morality is made of, being that it's physical. What is it composed of?
It's composed of memories and electrical signals traveling from some parts of the brain, and it's observed. You could observe it.
Which parts of the brain are moral and which aren't?
Well, parts of the brain aren't specifically moral, but the brain is.
Said that was, dude. I just said, where does morality exist? You said in the brain as parts of the brain and activity. I said, which of those things you're referring to is moral? And you said, and immoral. You said not. It's not now, right? You're contradicting yourself.
No, I'm saying the brain reflects moral prescriptions,
Reflects to
and you
who?
can
What are you
observe
talking
them.
about? Wait, no. The brain reflecting statements and positions isn't the same of whether or not morality itself is grounded as matter. That's like saying the brain could reflect what someone thinks of a unicorn. That doesn't mean that the brain is the unicorn and that unicorn suddenly exists merely because a brain reflects it.
I think there's a equivocation here because if you're asking where in the part of the brain morality exists, well, that's not what I believe in. I believe that morality has to also do with an abstract concept. You're talking
Are
about
those physical?
prescriptions. So
Are
the
those
part of
physical?
the
Hold on, one
the
at a
part
time.
that's
One at a time.
physical,
One at a
the
time.
part
Are
that's
abstract,
physical,
dude, Eva, one at a time. Are abstract concepts from your view concrete, like TJump's view, or are they not? Are they abstract and immaterial?
wait, say that again. Ask that again.
You said it's not just about the physicality. There's also abstract concepts. I'm asking you from your view, are abstract concepts also material, physical, like TJump thinks, or do you take a different approach?
Not sure what to say on that one. I can think about it and answer later. So I'm not
Yeah.
sure right now.
Sure. That's fine.
Does that answer all your questions?
Well, I don't think so, because I think his main question was how does Jimbob respond to the evidence of neurology that morality does stuff in the brain and it's physical?
There's no evidence.
Jimbob's typical answer is that it's just correlation, not causation. You see stuff in the brain, even though that's all the evidence in all the academic fields that all the experts agree, the only thing that makes testable predictions, but Miss Daddy could have done it too.
No one said that, T-Jump, you dummy. What I said is that if you're making the claim that morality exists in the brain, you're going to have to isolate what part of...
And then without lies, Islam dies asked again, is there a contradiction when objectively claiming that truth is subjective, or even worse, when claiming truth doesn't exist? They didn't say who that was to.
That's the T-Jump who said truth doesn't exist.
It would be a contradiction to say that, like, objective truth is subjective. That would be a contradiction. It's not an objection to say that truth doesn't exist as an independent thing. It exists as a part of sentences in the brain.
So it's not a universal again. We're back to the nominalist view that truth is identical to matter in the brain, and matter in the brain is not identical to other matter in the brain. Therefore, truth itself being reduced to particular matter that's not like other matter, there's no universality of truth. Hooked. Done. Stop talking. It's not good for you, T-Dump.
Nominalism is the consensus among experts. So Jimbob's just a dumbass because he thinks there's a problem with that. There's not.
Dude,
There's no problem with
you.
it.
I just
Jimbob
defeated
just-
you. You just said my experts say otherwise. You're dummy.
Like, he says there's a problem with the consensus.
dummy. You're just a
I explain
dum-dum.
why it's not, and he's like, oh, but the truth
Next,
statement can't
next,
exist in a different
next.
part of your brain.
So the entailment of your view.
Oh, no!
T-Jump, how do you not understand this? If the entailment of your
Direct you,
view
Jimbo.
is
Direct
that
you.
is that if truth itself is a particular thing in a particular brain, then there's no relation to other particular items in other brains. That's not a universal standard on truth.
Particular in my brain, and the same particular can exist in your brain.
No, that's impossible.
Yeah, no, it's
No,
possible.
that's a violation of law of identity.
No, it's not. It's not.
It is. My particular matter can exist in your brain.
I didn't say my particular matter. I said the same
Yes,
thing.
you did. You
There can be a rock over there,
your
and there can be a rock over there. There's two
No,
rocks.
they're not the same rock, dude.
They don't need to be the same rock. They don't need to be
Yeah, if
universal.
truth is universal, then
No, Jim Bob,
rocks
there
have
can
to
be
exist.
there can be collection universals. You can say, oh, there's two different rocks, but there's not a universal.
You don't have access to universals, dude.
Jim Bob, you don't need universals to say that there's two rocks. You don't need universals.
That's a contradiction. You just said rocks.
Yes, rocks. You can say that there are multiples of things without saying there's a universal.
You're assuming universals when you say rocks, dude.
No, Jim Bob, you're so dumb. Why do you think that you need universals to say that there's two of something?
You're referring to a
dumb,
category because you're referring to a category.
Why are you so dumb?
Because
Categories don't need to be universal. You can have categories that aren't universals, Jim Bob. Holy shit, how are you this dumb?
Are rocks universal?
No. Okay, so this is going back into cross-exam. So let's go ahead and go to Gundersmoot, who politely raised their hand. What's going on, Gundersmoot?
Hey everybody, I'm coming into this debate kind of late, so excuse me if this question has already been asked. I'm also kind of sick right now, got a bit of a cough, so I can't really have a big like shouty match thing. But I know the subject of the debate is, does morality reduce to the physical? But then, so my question is kind of tangential, but we have kind of debated a little bit if secular morality is better or if religious morality is better. And I believe in secular morality, and I think I can illustrate why with a pretty simple question that I think is interesting to think about. So I'm going to put it out there. Jim Bob, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. TJump, I think I already know what your answer would be. But here's the question. Do you think it should be an acceptable defense in a courtroom of law to say something like, oh, God told me to do this, or the devil or a demon possessed me and made me do it? Because I would say no.
Well, I mean, I would say no as well, because the law of the land can actually trump the theology. But the problem with that question is that if you turn it back on, let's say, a naturalist, an atheist who doesn't hold to free will or will at all, wouldn't it be just as much of a valid question if the lawyer raised his hand and said, Your Honor, free will doesn't exist. I just want you to consider that, given that you're about to judge my client's behavior. It wasn't really him, because there is no him. There's just an object in space reacting to chemical reactions, and he has no will in the matter or responsibility of the matter. Isn't that just as absurd as someone coming in and saying the demon made me do it? Swap demon with nature. I'm talking to Gundersmoot, dummy. I'm talking to Gundersmoot.
Or you don't want me to wreck you? Okay.
I'm talking to Gundersmoot. Let him respond to what I just said, dummy. So Gundersmoot, you see how I reject that anyone can just say God made me do it, and that would be a valid defense. But if you swap God with nature made me do it, chemicals made me do it, isn't that just as unreasonable in the court of law?
I think under a secular morality, you would reject either of those. But that's not a bad answer, Jim Bob. I can appreciate that answer.
I appreciate the question.
By the way, I'm Austin Sims. I don't know if you know that.
Hey, Austin. Oh, hey, man. How's you doing?
T-Jump, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so in compatibilism, you don't have free will, but you still have responsibility for your actions, even if your actions are determined by the physical structure of your brain. If the physical structure of your brain causes you to do crimes, we're still going to lock you up. It's like we'd lock up a bear. So it doesn't make a difference whether there's free will or not. You're still responsible for your actions. So no, it's not really a good answer.
Wait, we lock up bears for being bears?
We usually shoot them, but yes, we do.
Wait, when do we shoot them?
When do we shoot bears?
They violate the will of other animals, sentient animals. Are you advocate for bear jail?
Yes. That would
You
be
are
cool.
advocating for bear jail.
animals instead of killing them. Yes, that would be a more.
So the nature of a bear feeding its family by eating salmon or something of higher sentient should be punished with bear jail.
Yeah, if we could keep them alive without doing that, yes, we should prevent them from killing anything.
No,
ever.
why not bite that bullet? Yeah, go ahead.
Put them in a zoo, right?
Yeah, that would be more.
Well, you still have to feed them. Well, you still have to feed them in the zoo. That would be a violation of their will, though, putting them in a zoo.
True, it would be, but it would be less violation than let them kill things.
Right, it would be a less violation. So basically, your ideal world is a world where nothing depends on anything else.
Sort of, sure.
Yeah, pretty much. No laws of physics. No violation of what you want to do. You basically, your ideal world is putting on a helmet and conjuring your own reality in real time, right?
Well, no, the helmet would not be a part of it. No, you just have to be able to have control of your own reality and not be
So be God.
subject to
So
anything
be
else.
God.
Nope,
Essentially
because
God.
you can't control other people. That's the difference there. God's immoral. You would not be.
Yeah, but yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, but if someone wanted to exact their will and it just happened to include controlling or creating, let's say they can will the creation of automatons that they can control, that they get the experience of controlling other people, but they're not actually people. They're just automatons, meat puppets.
Totally fine.
But from that view, what distinguishes you right now from being a meat puppet from your own view?
I have consciousness.
What?
I have consciousness. Consciousness is what determines what something's moral. You don't need free will. Free will doesn't matter. Consciousness
Well, if consciousness is just a very intricate mechanism of input and evaluation of input, isn't it true that you could mimic your own consciousness in, say, a house? Like a house could be as conscious as you if it matched your capabilities of evaluation and data analysis?
Sure, but then it would be its own agent and it would need its own universe.
Well, no, if
This
we
is
could
going
produce
back into
that.
a cross exam.
Hold on. No, it's a hypothetical,
I'm glad
Taco.
the question provoked some interesting thoughts
I just-
and discussion. I'm going to step down off the stage before I start coughing all over everything. Thanks for answering, fellas.
I just wanted to know if we match the consciousness that you were convinced we matched the consciousness of a human being in a house, would you then give the house like rights and make sure that you would?
Yeah, if anything that's conscious has moral legitimacy,
House
so
rights.
anything that's conscious would have the same
Bear
rights
jail.
as any other.
Gotcha. Bear jail, house rights.
Oh, yep. Huh.
Yeah, and then
Consciousness.
B.S. Lewis, I think, had a follow up on his last question.
Hey guys,
Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. I'm conflicted because I don't believe the Tooth Fairy exists, and you guys both agreed that the Tooth Fairy does exist. Could you clear it up for me? What you mean by exist?
It exists as a figment of your imagination. If there's an idea in your head, like if you have an idea, the idea of the thing exists.
Superman. Superman exists in a type of way, but he doesn't exist in another type of way.
But that doesn't tell me what exist actually means in your guys' frameworks. You're just telling me those things do exist, but you're not telling me what they do.
Yeah, there's two categories. I have a view, by the way, B.S. Lewis, that you might share, which is there's a material category and there's an immaterial category, and Superman and the unicorn would exist in an immaterial conceptual category, but not in an actualized category. But I would believe that TJump, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the unicorn, under your view, actually does exist as a material thing because the concept itself can be reduced to physical items in your brain. So there would be an actual unicorn that is matter in your brain, right?
No, there wouldn't be an actual unicorn. There'd be an idea of a unicorn. And actual unicorns do not exist.
But what if the idea of the Tooth Fairy is that the Tooth Fairy is conscious and has free will and is a moral agent?
Well, if you had a super brain that could make it conscious just by you thinking about it, then yeah, it would be. But we don't have super brains.
So does existence have anything to do with reality?
Yes, existence is that which exists in reality.
Okay, so imaginary things that exist in your brain are real.
They are in reality, right?
The ideas exist, but the things in themselves do not exist.
This is my problem. Can ideas exist? Do ideas exist?
Yes, ideas exist. They're physical things in the brain.
So I guess BS is asking also, now correct me if I'm wrong, BS, is that when you interpret the external world, aren't you interpreting the external world through ideas, not a one-to-one? You're actually interpreting it through a lens of ideas and language?
Sure.
So so that view, if that's true, what's the essential difference between the unicorn existing in your brain as a thing, as an idea, and the ideas that you're using to describe hard reality? What's the difference between the two?
Well, they're both ideas. One is one that corresponds to reality. One is one that doesn't.
Does that make you a polytheist, TJump, because you're aware of all the other gods that exist?
No, because I don't think ideas are gods. So the ideas of the gods exist, but the gods themselves do not exist.
So Jimbob's god does not exist?
Nope, he exists as an idea in my brain, but he doesn't exist independent of my brain. No.
Yeah, but you're saying that the idea is synonymous with the thing.
No.
So a tooth fairy idea exists, but not a tooth fairy existing.
Correct.
So what does exist mean?
Things that exist in reality. So ideas exist because they exist in reality. But does the idea exist as a thing independent of the idea? No, because the unicorn doesn't exist in reality independent of an idea.
But that's a circular reasoning. I'm asking you what exists. You're saying
what premise was in the conclusion?
Exists in reality.
What premise was in the conclusion? If you're going to claim it's circular reason, you have to show which premise was in the conclusion.
That existence is what exists according to reality.
That wasn't the part of my argument. I said that if an idea of a thing exists, the idea exists, but the thing itself does not. If the thing itself exists independent of an idea, then it would exist in reality independent of an idea. There's no circularity there.
So is it possible that your moral field theory is just an idea that exists and not actually
Absolutely.
existing?
Every theory could be wrong, sure.
Okay,
So
how do we test?
Then he's asking, like, if that's the case, if you're positing that it does, where, he
asked me a question, Jimbo. He asked a question. How do we test it? We make predictions. We say, if my model is correct, we would predict that moral intuitions continue to change in a way that I would be consistent with my model. Like rocks falling on people would eventually be seen as immoral. That would be a way to test it.
How could we test if the tooth fairy exists?
You would have to find the tooth fairy and then find what entailments would exist in it and then test if those entailments were true. I don't really know.
Wait, you said testing, you would test it by saying the rocks would stop. We would find that rocks falling on people is immoral, but why did you choose that and not choose the fact that we require air to breathe? Isn't that immoral?
Sure.
It's an imposition of will, right?
I would actually agree. I'd say if my model of morality is correct, eventually we'll see the case that we have to have air to breathe as immoral.
So getting back to my question, hold on, Jimbob. Because I'm still stuck on the tooth fairy thing. Because you're saying that you're not a polytheist, TJump, because even though you're aware that all the different gods have been proposed as ideas, you do not believe that they exist.
Right. For them to be gods, they have to exist independent of ideas. If they don't exist independent of ideas, they're not gods. They're just ideas of gods. Problem solved.
Okay. So what if there is been a god who's proposed to be an idea?
And it wouldn't be a god that exists independent of ideas. Problem solved. Very simple.
But it would still exist, though.
As an idea, which is fine. Ideas we don't care.
Okay. I'm just confused. It's kind of confusing because it's all metaphysical arguments.
There's absolutely nothing metaphysical about that. This is very simple. The difference between ideas and things existing independent of ideas is a very simple distinction. It should not take this hard to understand it.
Well, TJump, do you think rights exist?
As ideas.
But they don't actually exist.
No. Rights aren't a part of
okay. I was just going to ask, should we assume rights exist even though they don't exist? Should we pretend they do?
I mean, it's pragmatic, so sure.
So should we pretend gods exist?
Some societies have had benefits of believing in gods, and so in that case, maybe.
Okay. So, I'm still stuck on the existing. Jimbob, maybe you can help me because I'm not getting help from TJump. What does exist mean?
This is not hard. Let's just move on.
I'm just asking Jimbob, if he's aware, what exists, because you keep saying that exist means that something's different if exists as a idea, and ideas do not exist in reality, or they do exist in reality. But
my God,
what does exist mean? Does it mean take up time and
reality? Anything in reality exists.
Okay, and hallucinations, they exist?
Yes, they exist in your brain.
Okay, so they're kind of not hallucinations then.
No, they're still hallucinations. They wouldn't be hallucinations if they existed independent of your brain.
Okay.
Very simple. Things that exist as only a parts of your brains are subjective. Things that exist independent of your brain are objective. Very simple. This is not a hard problem to solve.
So you're
So
putting them.
an idea of a unicorn is subjective. An actual unicorn existing independent of anybody's thoughts would be an actually existing unicorn, and they don't exist.
But you're still classifying as subjectively and objectively existing. I'm not asking about the different categories of existing. I'm like, what does exist mean?
Anything in reality, that's what exist means.
Would be objectively or objectively and subjectively.
Yes. Anything
So
in reality is all things that exist, both objectively and subjectively. This is not hard. This is so incredibly simple.
The concept of nothing exists.
The concept of nothing exists, yes.
So nothing exists. The concept.
No. Again, we've already covered this. Objectively, nothing does not exist. Subjectively, nothing exists as a concept. This is very simple. We've covered this.
Okay. Well, I don't think I'm going to get anywhere, but I appreciate your good time. Thank you.
Thank you, BS. Have a good one. And then we've got Repsev. What's going on, Repsev?
Yes, hello. I got a question for TJump. Why do you posit imposition of will as a universal principle when there are clear exceptions to the rule?
The pattern in moral intuition and moral progress is that as we gain more technology, less impositions of will are tolerated as moral. And so if that pattern is continued across time, infinitely, you'd come to the conclusion that any imposition of will is immoral.
Okay, but it doesn't apply universally, so
The pattern does apply universally.
like when we save a child from an oncoming car, that's an example of the imposition of will being a good thing, right?
No. So again, the pattern is as you gain more power, less impositions of will are seen as moral. So if you were an all-powerful being, would smacking a child out of the way of a car, harming the child, would that be considered moral? No, it would be considered immoral if you had the power to snap your fingers and move the child without harming it. So no, even in that case, as you increase in power, it would still be seen as immoral to push the child out of the way.
Does the imposition of will necessarily imply harm?
No.
So
Yeah.
what makes it necessarily bad?
What makes what necessarily bad?
Imposition of will. If you could move the child without harming it, like you said, is that still immoral? You're still imposing on the will.
Well, no. So in that case, that would be less immoral if the kid didn't want to be moved. If the kid wanted to be moved, it'd be moral to move the kid. So the most moral thing to do would be essentially to teleport the car or something.
That's an imposition of will on the driver.
No, there's no one.
It is.
The
Of
car isn't
course.
the driver. No, it's not.
The car
There
is
is no
driving.
driver. No, there could be a driverless car.
Wow.
Problem.
Wow. So you just remove objects from people that constrain them from moving.
Yes, 'cause that wasn't part of the question.
In this instance, maybe the child is not aware of the oncoming car, and so doesn't necessarily want to move out of the way.
Sure. So moving the car would be less immoral because you're imposing even less none on the child, so there would be no immorality to it whatsoever.
Imposing
Like if you
will
push
on
the
the
car.
car.
Yeah, because the car doesn't have a will. It's a non-conscious entity.
Person
So
driving it
moving the
does.
child would be an imposition on the child's will because it
Someone's
doesn't want to
property,
move.
though, bro. Someone's property.
Not in the best of all possible worlds. If it's in the card's universe.
Oh,
So,
in the imaginary world, that's where you're
Jim Bob, stop bringing up irrelevant things to the question.
Irrelevant. You brought up property before in the debate, dude.
Yes, which has what to do with this question, Jim Bob? It has nothing. It
Moving
has
a
nothing
car
to do with
is
this question.
moving a car is someone's property. Yes.
Jim Bob, this has nothing to do with the question.
Is
Is
car
moving
property?
the child immoral? That was the question, Jim Bob. Are you answering the question?
You
No,
said
Jim
moving-
Bob, you are
you
not.
said
moving the child immoral. Yes, if moving the child would be immoral, if you have a less moral option that you have the power to do. So if you have a less moral option that you have the power to do, it would be immoral to move the child because you chose to do a more immoral action than a less immoral action.
Why is it more immoral though?
Because that's what the evidence indicates by looking at the patterns of moral intuition and moral progress. Already answered.
No, that doesn't tell me why it's immoral. It just restates that it's immoral. We're asking why is it immoral to violate one's will?
The patterns in morality. We look at patterns. We say these are what the word morality refers to. These patterns indicate this principle is what morality is. If that's the case, this is immoral. Problem solved.
It doesn't tell us why imposing on will is immoral. So, okay, so
Did
nobody.
that address your question?
Not really. Like, I'm trying to understand why the imposition of will is necessarily bad when it can serve a greater good in certain instances, relative instances.
So the answer to that question was, if you do an action that has more imposition of will, when you have the power to do an action that has less imposition of will, you're doing an immoral action. It's like a doctor. If a modern doctor cuts your leg off instead of giving you antibiotics, just because they wanted to cut your leg off, that's immoral because they had an action that would cause less harm or less imposition on will that they didn't take. So the reason pushing the child or causing an imposition of will is immoral is if there is an option to do something that has less imposition that you did not do.
Okay.
That's why it would be immoral.
Okay. I get that it's maybe not the ideal thing, but relative in this situation, it is the moral thing to do.
Point of objective morality is that it's true objectively independent of your subjective limitation. So objectively, is pushing the child out of the way immoral? Yes. Subjectively for you, it might be the best you can do, which would make it subjectively moral. But if we want objective morality, we want to know what's best in the best of all possible worlds.
Right? Isn't interpreting patterns subjective?
Interpretations are subjective. Patterns are objective.
Uh-oh. So now you have to interpret
No,
the
Jim Bob,
pattern.
I just
Uh-oh.
dumped on you, dumbass.
Another L
Jim
for
Bob,
T-Jump.
Jim Bob, I
Another
just
one.
dumped on
Stack
your
them up.
dumbass.
Stack them up.
I'm going to mute Jim Bob so I can explain why
I'm
I
going to
jumped on
mute.
his
Yeah, you're going to
dumbass.
mute because I'm
So,
wrecking you.
subjective interpretations can be subjective. The facts and data are there objectively. And so if your subjective interpretations are correct and they correspond to reality, then guess what? It's objectively true. The subjective interpretations don't matter. Next.
In this world, rather than some other possible world, the imposition of will to move the child out of the way is the best possible moral action you could do.
Yep. So it's subjectively moral for you, but it's not
immoral.
No, it's subjectively moral for you. It's still immoral because you're still imposing on will. In a perfect world, objective morality, there would be no imposition of will.
Okay, in a perfect world.
Yep.
It's not this one.
So objective morality, which refers to things that are true in all possible worlds, it is objectively immoral to push the child, even though it is less immoral than letting him be hit by the car.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Repsev. And then there was a question from PhD and ADHD for Jim Bob. If morality was just physical, why would that have negative connotations?
What do you mean? If morality was physical, I didn't argue whether it would have negative connotations. The question is, can the claim be justified? Can you reduce something like morality being conceptual and filter it down to particular items and matter or physicality? This is the question. Whether or not it's has negative connotations, it seems irrelevant. It doesn't follow to me that it has negative connotations. It's just incoherent to me.
I think he's asking, like, would a physical model of morality be less legitimate than like a spiritual non-physical model? Would it be less likely to be objective or something?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem I have with it is that if it's physical and it acts kind of law-like, then it itself, being a law, would impose some type of will. In other words, you couldn't violate it with your will. Like if I wanted to violate gravity with my will, I couldn't do it. I wanted to violate these laws that are in place that we describe in nature that seem regular and lawful. I couldn't do it. If I wanted to, that's a violation of my will, the fact that I can't do it, right? So I'm just wondering from that view, if morality was physical and it was law-like, akin to gravity, which you used as a parallel, I'm just still uncertain of what is it to violate a thing if you can't point to the thing you're violating. Whereas the effect of gravity, you can actually look at, can we violate it or not? This is what happens when you think you can. That's an impact. I just don't see in real time what the referent is. Now, for gravity, there's a referent.
Can you violate the charm law? Can you violate the charm law? What makes a particle kind of a charm? You know, there's different kinds of properties within particles. Charm, spin, weights, those kinds of things.
Okay,
there's a law that regards charm of a positive and negative proton. Can we violate that particle? Can we violate that law?
the behavior itself?
Can we violate the charm law?
We might be able to intervene and manipulate if that's what you're asking.
No, we cannot do that.
Well, if we can't, then yeah. I mean, I'm talking about laws. If it's something that's lawful,
law.
then we can't. We can't violate it. So that if I wanted to violate it, if it was my will, TJump, to violate it, is that an imposition of will? If I wanted to violate that and I couldn't.
No. Well, yes, but that's
is it
different question. Different question.
Well,
so in this case, wait. A law can exist that we can or can't violate that has no effect on us whatsoever. The charm law does not affect us. It has no effect on us whatsoever, but it's still there. It determines the truth of whether or not a quirk has a charm aspect to it. That's it. And so there could be a moral law that's there that determines whether or not an action is moral or immoral, regardless of whether we want to violate it. All it does is determine the truth or falsity of what actions are moral or immoral. That's it.
TJump, but I don't agree that it doesn't affect you. The knowledge of knowing what a charm law is and how these things behave does inform how we do further research. So it does actually, in fact, impact what we do.
The point of whether or not we can violate the law doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So there can be a law of morality that has no effect on us directly. All it does is it affects the charm of the morality. It determines if the action is moral or immoral. Whether we can violate or not is irrelevant.
But the TJump, the problem is that you have a referent when you're talking about the charm. I'm asking for the referent for morality, and you can't give me one.
It's a quantum field, just like every field. There's the answer.
Where is morality in the quantum field then?
Everywhere.
It's everywhere is saying it's nowhere.
Fields exist everywhere. All the fields exist everywhere.
Every field exists everywhere. Okay. Where do you separate the moral field from the other fields?
Same way you do. All fields have different components to them. So you can separate the fields.
What's the components of the moral field?
Well, if I could discover that, I'd have a Nobel Prize. So we'll discover that.
Don't know.
Yes, and that's fine. I never claimed to know that.
You just made it up.
No, it's a part of the hypothesis. That's perfectly fine. Like I didn't make it up.
Sky
Daddy was made up. Sky Daddy was made up.
Hypothesis, TJump, is when you observe something and then you attribute
like moral intuition, moral progress. Yes.
Where did you observe moral progress? Question begging.
In history, in people.
Oh, where? Give me an example of moral progress.
Women's rights. I know you probably don't agree with it, but yeah.
Did the moral field cause women's rights?
No.
So then, what caused women's rights?
The moral intuitions and moral progress changing over time.
So can
the moral field just determines the truth. The moral intuition, the moral field just determines the truth of whether it's moral or not. That's it.
No, if it's a fact that we can do moral progress, and there are people who also think that women's voting and women's rights is moral progress, if they can come to that conclusion without a moral field, I'm wondering what's the use of the moral field?
Determine whether or not it's true.
Yeah, they've already used their intuition, which is your standard for determining whether the moral field is true, is the intuitions. We already established that intuitions inform us of whether or not.
Objective, it needs to be true, independent of intuitions. Intuitions can be the data points, but for it to be true objectively, it needs to correspond to something independent, like a law of physics. Problem solved.
And what evaluates the moral field? The intuitions, right?
No, nothing evaluates the field. The intuitions are like seeing something. You could be wrong, but it's evidence.
All right. And so that's moving back into cross-examination territory. So let's move on to the next question. I appreciate both y'all's input on the topic, though. And then Baked Alaska, what's going on, man? Your microphone is not working. You may want to rejoin. Oh, you can hear him? I had him blurred for some reason. My bad.
I can hear him too.
I fixed it.
Yeah, so TJump, I just wanted to pick up on what you're saying there. What determines the progress?
So there's a pattern in changes over time. As you gain more power, you get more individual rights. And that pattern continues in a single direction.
What's driving the pattern?
Like gaining power as we gain power because of our moral intuitions, we tend to think that
is power the same as morality?
No, power is
okay. So we're going to separate the two. So we gain power. What's driving the progress?
Our moral intuitions.
What do you mean our moral intuitions?
We have intuitions that we should give people more individual rights, and those intuitions change over time in the same direction.
So people themselves is what's making the world more moral?
Could be. But what's
Well, no,
causing
well,
this is
is it or
irrelevant. Who cares?
I don't. What do you mean? Who cares?
Who cares?
This is
What
the
matters
predicate of your
if for
entire
objective
argument.
morality to exist, it doesn't matter what's
Yeah.
causing it.
So, well, it is, since your entire argument is that
No.
there's a pattern, and you're relying on the pattern as the basis of your entire argument. Are you not?
Sure. And that doesn't make a difference to whether or not, if morality is causing it, that's fine. And if it's not, it's totally fine too.
Could
Either
the
way, it's still
pattern
evidence.
could the pattern be a false positive?
Absolutely. All evidence could be a false positive. It just doesn't matter. It's an irrelevant question.
Okay. So it's basically speculation that there's this pattern and that,
Well, the pattern is not speculation. We observe the pattern.
well, it's kind of begging the question because you're saying like it's
No,
there's
it's
progress.
induction.
What's the progress
It's
measured
induction.
against? What's the progress measured against?
It's just a pattern. So like, if the pattern continues and there's more of some property, that's a pattern.
Is it
Call
quantified?
progress.
What is
Yes.
the property? What's the property?
Property is in more individual rights. So as we gain power, we gain more
How do
individual
you
rights.
measure that? So is abortion
look at society.
is abortion an individual right?
If it doesn't have consciousness, no.
What are you measuring at? What are you counting as an individual right? Is it the right to an abortion an individual right?
Sure, for the woman, yes.
Okay. And you realize that a lot of people consider that to be immoral, right?
A minority of people in Republican states.
Can aborting a child be immoral?
Absolutely, if it's conscious.
Okay. So you're just saying in any individual right is equivalent to increasing morality, making the world better.
Sort of, not really.
Well, when is it not?
Like if you're harming somebody else.
Okay. So like the abortion situation, right?
What? Say again?
Like an abortion?
If abortion isn't conscious, then it's not immoral. If it's conscious, it's immoral, yeah.
Okay, I gotcha. So okay, so your model is we expand individual rights when power increases, and that equals good.
Well, it's a pattern. And the hypothesis is that pattern indicates something more fundamental.
Is the pattern driven by subjective choices made by people?
It could be driven by a lot of things. Doesn't make a difference what it's driven by.
How can it not make a difference? Is the pattern does the pattern have an ontology in and of itself, or is it derivative of something else?
It may or may not be. It's irrelevant. I don't really care. It's not a part of
How
the
is it
hypothesis.
irrelevant? It's the entire basis of your argument, isn't it?
What causes it could be lots of things. I don't really care. Like I never
So
made
if
a claim
something
to what
evil
causes it.
causes the pattern, then you wouldn't care?
Sure.
That's completely contradictory.
No.
Okay.
It's
It's
genetic
not.
fallacy. What causes the pattern doesn't make a difference. The pattern
What
is
the
there.
pattern
regardless of what
is
caused it.
makes a difference.
So I've already answered your question. Do you have another question?
I'm trying to think. So, no, I could probably leave it there.
All right.
Thank you, Baked Alaska. We appreciate your time.
Later.
Then we've got T-Town Trader.
Hi there.
Hey,
Yes,
what's
can you
going
hear me?
on? Yep.
Hey, sorry. I'm using my wife's Discord since I don't have one myself, but I did have a question for TJump. So when you're saying, I kind of got here a little bit late, so I wanted to hear this again. You said that that morals do exist physically in materials. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So that exists somewhere in your brain. Is that somewhere within your mind? It's
no.
You said it's neurons, is that right?
No, law of physics exists everywhere in the universe.
So morals exist everywhere in the universe. And how do you determine what those morals are?
By looking at
Like, are you
patterns of
reading
moral
it on a
intuition
map,
and moral
on a star map? Or where are you reading it from?
Looking at patterns of moral intuition and moral progress.
Okay, and is that a map you're reading, or where are you gathering this moral philosophy?
Looking at patterns of moral intuition and moral progress.
Okay, you keep repeating the same thing, not actually answering
We
my
went over this
question.
like 800 times. So we look at societies and how moral intuitions change over time, and we say, oh, look, there's a pattern there. And then we make a hypothesis. Oh, if this pattern continues, this is what it leads to. And if it, at least this is what it leads to, then there's probably some underlying cause, like an undiscovered law of physics. Problem solved.
Problem solved is not actually the answer. You keep saying that you're looking back on patterns. That actually doesn't give you the recognition of the actual pattern itself. You're just pointing at something and saying, hey, look, that item over there, or that pattern over there, as you're saying,
so like,
is a
as
pattern
we gain
of
more
morals.
power, as I've said this 50 times, as we gain more power, everywhere in society, everywhere in the world, we gain more individual rights. That's the pattern. If we continue the pattern infinitely, it will lead to the conclusion any imposition on will is immoral. That's the conclusion of the hypothesis. If that's true, and this is caused by some underlying law of physics, then it's objective. Problem solved. Like, what about this? Don't you understand?
Now, there's a big, massive flaw that you have is you basically are presuppositioning all of the entirety of history of where do you get to this, at this point? Like, your idea wouldn't have been able to exist, or back, let's say, 1,000 years ago.
What you said literally just made no sense. I'm not presupposing anything about history. I'm just looking at the history data. Like, what am I presupposing? What are you talking about?
Presupposing the material itself. How was anyone ever able to have this thought process, let's say, 1,000 years ago?
What are you talking about? I'm not presupposing materialism. It has nothing to do with materialism. It's just a pattern. Like, materialism is a separate argument there.
So the morals that exist, they exist in your mind, but also in the universe, is what you're saying. So this field,
they exist in the universe.
Is that what you're talking about?
They exist in the universe. If your mind doesn't exist, they still exist in the universe.
So again, that's just an assertion. That's not actually
that's
provable. Where can you measure this?
If I could prove it, I'd have a Nobel Prize. I know nowhere I claimed I could prove it. That's not the point of the argument. No one claimed that.
So then how is that any better of an argument than a theist who's saying God exists, but yet I can't prove it with certainty in science?
Because there's evidence for it. It follows the evidence of moral intuition, moral progress. It doesn't just make shit up out of thin air.
Well, actually, we have the same thing that we could say and go back to in historiological, findings for the actual facts behind the Bible itself. Historically, we've been able to find tablets and stones and cities that existed underground. So how again are you any better than a theist or the Bible itself?
That's all false. But it's irrelevant to the question.
You can say that it's false, but it doesn't mean that it's false. I can say yours is false.
It's academically proven to be false, which is why all of the academics think theism is a joke when it comes to anything related to like science. But in regards to morality, there is no evidence of morality related to anything in the Bible. All of the evidence contradicts the Bible and what morality is. And so, like, if we were comparing which model is a better model of morality, we'd say, well, is killing people for disobeying their parents in agreement with the moral intuitions or moral progress or philosophical dilemmas that exist in the field of morality? No, it's just stupid. So when we're comparing different models of morality, we want to say, well, oh, what does this claim morality is, and does that agree with all of the evidence of morality from moral intuitions and moral progress and philosophical dilemmas? Theism does not. My model does. That's why that would be better than theism. Also, because there's no evidence of non-physical things, and mine is based in physical things, which we do have evidence for.
So science is your God, basically, is what you're saying.
No, nowhere did I say that.
I know, but you're basically assuming that God is essentially your science. Science is your God.
No, that's just a stupid thing theists say in order to try to make a false God argument. No, I never said God is science or science is God. Science isn't all powerful. No, I don't worship science. It can't kill people. No. So no, it's not like God at all. That's just a stupid thing theists say for no reason.
But is it discovered? Is it a discoverable item that you found or that people find?
Yes.
Okay. So if that's something that you're discovering constantly, so is there an infinite amount of science to be found and to be had, to be changed? In other words, could you be completely wrong right now, and then in 100 years they find that this guy TJump was just bananas?
If you know anything about philosophy, you know everyone could always be wrong, especially theists who are usually wrong.
All right, perfect. Then you can easily be wrong. Great. I'll leave it there.
The theists. So I'm less likely to be wrong than any of the theists. That's the point. That's what makes it argument. That's what makes it better than the theists. It's less likely to be wrong than the stupid theist arguments. So evidence.
Sure. Another assertion. Good job.
Thank you, T-Town. And then, okay, I want to be considerate of y'all's time as we've been going for 3 hours. there's still a lot of questions. If y'all want to take more questions, I'm cool with it. If y'all want to move into the conclusions, we can do that too. What would y'all like to do?
Yeah, my throat's getting out pretty hard, so I'm ready to head out.
I can take more questions if they're for me. If they're not, I can head out too. It's fine.
Cool. If you want, what we can do here is we'll move into the conclusions. And then if you want to stick around for a few minutes, Jim Bob, we can do a quick question and answer with you. Is that okay? Cool. All right. So let's move into the conclusions. These are going to be 5 minutes each. TJump, we'll begin yours when you, well, tell me to start it.
Yeah, I'll just go with my opening. My opening is the exact same. Was right the first time.
Okay.
Next.
Okay, so that's the conclusion?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, TJump. And then Jim Bob? You're muted right now.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, the topic of the debate is morality physical. TJump affirmed that it is physical. Ultimately, he says, I can't prove it. It's just an idea. Whether or not the idea has any credence, whether it's coherent or not, I think it was demonstrated tonight that it does not have any coherency. I think TJump is all over the place with this philosophy. I think there was an equal amount of atheists who actually think this philosophy, this worldview is a complete joke without even making fun of theism. When it comes down to it, the key points here are, if morality is itself a natural law, like gravity is, then it definitionally imposes on the will. If immorality is the imposition of will, then morality is an imposition of will. That is to say, the conclusion would be morality is immoral under this moral field theory. Further, when I ask him, what is morality made of? What's the referent? He points to physical things as some sort of parallel analogy. I didn't ask for analogy. Many callers ask for, what is it you're actually referring to that's physical that you're calling morality? He says a field. Say, which field? He says all of it. It's everywhere. Okay, well, if every field is everywhere, how do you distinguish between one field, a quantum field, and another thing you're calling a moral field? And what does it matter if we can just violate it anyway? Is it a weak force? Is it a strong force? Can we oppose it in any way? Can we say that the morality field made me do it? And lastly, the real destruction here was that last caller who basically demonstrated that from TJump's view, when it comes down to the ontology of the pattern itself, TJump doesn't have a position on what's causing the pattern, what's derivative of. He said if it was derivative from subjective opinions and intuitions, it wouldn't matter. Well, no, that would make it subjective if it was derivative from subjective trends. The question was asked, is there anything ultimate and universal about this moral field theory that states that the pattern itself has its own positive ontology such that you can't manipulate it? It would be irrelevant to the patterns of subjective preferences and trends throughout society. It would exist before humans existed. So what would be the ontology of the moral field before humans existed, and what would it affect? The answer is obviously, I don't know. Why? Because TJump made up his entire moral field theory, and it's total trash.
Gotcha.
Better than the Sky Daddy, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's not what we're talking about. Sky Daddy already is a better theory.
No, it's not.
It's equal, dude. You just we just made it up too. Just like you did.
No, because you're confusing the pattern.
No, we just made it up. No, the pattern of human beings. The pattern of human beings is that they believe in gods. That's the pattern throughout humanity. Intuition is that gods exist. It means that the intuition of man, is yeah, exactly. You're wrecked.
No, you got wrecked because clearly you didn't.
The intuition of man is to believe in God. Cross cultures, cross time. That's the pattern.
No, actually, the pattern is
actually, I talked to some people who have a PhD on my podcast, and they said otherwise.
Oh, yeah, because remember, pattern moral progress over time. Progress is away from.
You're muted. I don't hear you. You're muted. No, you're muted. I don't hear you. I don't hear you. You're muted.
And so I can answer the question.
I don't hear you, TJump. I don't hear you, bro.
Moral progress. The progress of beliefs is away from.
Literally don't hear you.
Less religious over time, which means that would actually be evidence of my position too. Bye.
Okay, thank you both of you for such a fun and lively debate. It was a pleasure having you both here. I appreciate both of your time. I do want to say, everybody in the audiences, make sure you follow MadeByJimbob and TJump. They both have a ton of great content. And then on top of that, we're on the Politics Discord, https://www.discord.gg/politics. Make sure you join the Politics Discord. It's awesome. That's where you can see these debates live, raise your hand, talk with the guests. But make sure to join us. You can even talk with some of us in the Discord throughout the week. Anyways, do either of you have any additional plugs? I know you just released a book, TJump.
Yeah. My book is Objective Morality Without God, ? You can find it on Amazon.
And yeah, I would just say to Breakfast Tacos, your channel, your followers, be sure to support Tacos if you like what he's doing. He does a lot of work that you guys don't know about. And even though I have my own opinions about tonight's moderation, I think if you do like his channel, you like what he does on Discord, you like what he does on videos, definitely show him some love and support there. He's really bad at asking.
Thank you so much, Jim Bob. I wasn't TJump there, but cool. I know TJump wanted to go. If you want to stick around, it sounded like you're cool with it. There's still a ton of hands raised, right? I'd be happy to host a quick, pull some people up and chat with you for another 30 minutes or so if you want.
I could do that. It might be 25, or maybe 30.
No worries. Whenever you want to go, you can go.
Sure.
TJump, anything else?
No, I'm out. See you later.
Well, have a good one. Thank you, brother. But everybody have a wonderful evening. I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm sure almost every one of you are as well. Do you have any closing words, Jim Bob?
No, thanks again, Taco. I hope you keep doing debates. I hope your audience grows and we elevate the contention between worldviews and have it out on the dance floor. With that said, go follow me at MadeByJimbob. I do take on callers almost every single live stream. Something comes up where someone wants to counter. I'm pretty much open to calls. It happens into Discord, so if you're already here, that would be your way of jumping on. I also use Whereby if you use that as well. So with that said, appreciate it. I'm gonna have to head to bed myself. And thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. I'm turning this off. Oh, just one last thing. Thank you, everybody everybody in the audience for being here. Thank you for watching for many hours. You're all amazing. I hope you all have a wonderful, morning at this point.